We're going to start our public meeting. It is 6:10 on June 14th, 2018. This is the regular monthly meeting of the Alameda County Water District. And I'd like to have the secretary take the roll.
Sure. Directors Gunther, Akbari,
Here.
Huang, Weed,
Here.
and Sethy.
Here. So Director Gunther is on his way caught in traffic, and Director Huang is on a flight back and may be here later this evening. So may I call on, how about our general manager to lead us in the salute?
Certainly. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, we'll take public comments from the public. We're happy to see you here this evening. Mr. Lemos, please come on up.
Thank you. Good evening, board members and panel. As always, I have some comments. Ever since I've seen his comments in the Voice, Mr. Sethy and Laura Hyden, I've been wanting to come, but other things have been gotten in the way.
Could you put the microphone a little bit closer to yourself? Thank you.
Okay. In your letter that I got, it said you would make comments on the budget at this time, and then we could make comments on it. I don't know if my comments would influence it or be...
We have an agenda item, 5.13, which is on the budget.
Okay.
Would you like to withhold those comments until
Sure,
then?
5.3. So I'll just ask some questions, if I may.
No.
And one of them is, what about the recycled water that you did not go with USD? I noticed that you're going to have a meeting with USD. I was just wondering if that was going to happen, or, you know, if that's just something else you're going to have a meeting about. It didn't say exactly what that meeting was going to be about. Also, what happened to Los Vaqueros that you were going to invest in the expansion of that reservoir? Nothing's been said about it. And so on the first of this month on the TV news, they said that in 2020, people in California will be allotted only 50 gallons of water per day per person. I just wondered if there was any comments from
By
this
2030.
Other than that, I'll wait until you get on the budget, and I'll have more comments on that, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like me to respond to?
Briefly on
Sure.
Well,
USD and Los Vaqueros?
So ACWD has initiated conversations with both Union Sanitary District and San Francisco Public Utilities Commission on the potential for a regional recycled water indirect potable reuse project. I have on the agenda later in the board meeting under General Manager's reports where I was going to provide that information to the board and basically inform the board that I will be back if we get closer to entering into a formal agreement. But those conversations are happening now. Regarding Los Vaqueros, the State Water Commission is still evaluating in its process the funding for the various Proposition 1 projects that have been proposed. Los Vaqueros is one of them. The ACWD board is very interested in seeing what the final funding, grant funding from the state will be, so that we as staff can evaluate a business case for the board so that they can make a decision on whether and how much ACWD participates in that project. But that project is still moving forward. And then lastly on the budget, as board president indicated, we have an item on that.
thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lemos. Any other member of the public that wishes to come forward? Seeing none, we will close public comments. We'll turn to the consent calendar right now. In order to expedite things, I'm going to make the motion myself. I have a request from Director Weed to pull item 5.9 briefly for discussion. And so I will move to approve the consent calendar with the addition of items 5.1 through 5.8 and 5.10 and 5.11.
Second.
Okay. Directors Gunther, Akbari,
Aye.
Huang, Weed,
Aye.
and Sethy.
Aye. And do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar as amended?
As amended?
I'll second.
Okay. Directors Gunther, Akbari,
Aye.
Huang, Weed,
Aye.
and Sethy.
Aye. So we'll open up 5.9 for hopefully a brief discussion, comments?
Okay, I don't think we need a staff introduction. It's in the documents on the doing a survey. First of all, the technical question. One of the options we discussed was the ability to remotely turn on and off the water service at a meter. The question I have, will that require augmentation in power, a separate power source to the meter for any or all of the meter sizes we have?
So it's my understanding that the smaller meters, that would be the vast majority of the meters that would be converted in this program, would not require any external power. They have battery power for the AMI equipment, and that battery would be used for remote shutoff. For larger meters, I'm not certain, but these alternatives in equipment would also be considered in the upcoming alternatives analysis that we're working on.
Well, as we go into the final details on this survey, if we could get some feedback on whether some of the meters have, in their attempt to go for long battery life, have a watch-style battery to maintain the information, but not capable of actually physically turning the water service on and off, that we have that information. And if it is an element that maybe we do want to identify in the survey, whether alternate power sources are in or near the individual meters, because that could be a major factor when it comes to trying to look at what the cost is going to be to try and retrofit and change out the meter sizes, locations. And it may well be that we don't have the money to do it for many of them, but if we have it within, we might be able to do it for some but not others, which further complicates the action. But it's one of those elements that I think is worthy to evaluate as early as possible. The second comments I have relate to the AMI program as a whole. There's an indication, there's a flavor in the staff report that the board is on board for a $25 million expenditure over the next 5 years. And while the initial survey is an important element of that, I am not on board for that at this point. And two elements. One is that I believe we can meet the financial objectives that we were looking at with AMI, particularly since we have the very great fortune of not having tiered rates. We have some flexibility in how we manage our rate structure to bill monthly and read quarterly or every 4 months. You achieve the same cost savings in manpower. The other is I'm concerned about where is the real need. It came out at the last workshop we had that we had invested in putting a AMI pilot program for the 400 plus meters that were truly benefit from AMI, the larger meters. It went over to finance where it died. And there's a certain silo effect that we have in that I believe finance looks at it as a means to make the meter reading far more effective and efficient, which it does, and I think we'll eventually be there. But the concept of conservation dropped, and no one cared, and many critical didn't even know. As a board member, I didn't know that we'd not done it, and I learned later that there were other members of the staff that were not aware that this had died. So it begs the question, is it really that important to us as a whole? I would encourage us to revisit the decision on the AMI and possibly start the information being given to the 400-plus large meter users, because part of that basis, that discussion at the time, was to look at a water budget for the larger users where it might make sense. But as we approach this, and it's a major expenditure, and the technology is changing by the day, we're going to get there. I'm not certain that the 5-year time schedule we're looking at is the most effective for this district and will give us the proper payback for what we're, identify what our real objectives are. So that's where I stand, and I will probably, at this point, I'm not supporting it. I'm not going to oppose it. I will abstain on 5.9. But we need 3 votes, so can we delay that item until Mr. Gunther arrives?
We may want to hold this until Director Gunther attends, and then we can have the vote then.
Okay. So we'll just suspend further action on item 5.9, right, until Director Gunther is available. All right, at this point, instead of going directly into the 2 following action items, 5.12 and 5.13, we will take the staff presentation, item 6.3.1, retiree health benefit actuarial valuation presentation from Bartel and Associates.
And President Sethy, perhaps before we get started on this item, if I may, I'd just like to introduce Mr. Doug Pryor from Bartel and Associates. He's vice president with their consulting firm. He's an associate in the Society of Actuaries and has over 20 years of experience in employee benefits, much of that focused on valuations for defined benefit, pension, and retiree health care plans. And so has a great deal of expertise in this field and has been leading the effort to develop the district's valuation. And so with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to him to begin the presentation.
Thank you. Good evening. I have kind of a fairly short summary of what's a lengthy actuarial report with a lot of details. It's a 60-plus page report, but what we have here is kind of boiled down to some key issues and items in this presentation. So would it be the arrow? My
While we have a little break, allow me to mention to the audience that Director Weed and I went through the full-blown presentation in a recent Finance Committee meeting with a fine-tooth comb.
almost all the
So
60 pages.
it was a very lengthy. It was a very lengthy meeting. Battery?
Yeah.
I apologize. What we'll do is I'll bring this to the podium, and then you can just use the keyboard to advance the slide. Yeah.
Hopefully. Does it work?
I think I'm jinxing you guys today.
It doesn't.
This keyboard.
Is it? Yeah, it's just the.
Okay.
So it's the, if you want to try, I was using the mouse wheel. That's working. So, yeah, I apologize.
And you do PowerPoint show, is that the same?
It's just showing the slide presentation.
We're
There.
making
Okay.
your life challenging today.
I will also mention, for the benefit of the audience here, it's almost like you have to go through a week of training in order to comprehend all of this information. This is really hard for, I think, the public to digest in just a short presentation here.
So let me nonetheless try to take a shot at it here. So we have a few slides summarizing the benefits that are provided by the district. To be eligible, you need to retire directly from the district and elect a medical plan at retirement. I'll get the hang of this here. So there's really 3 tiers: those hired before 2002, which have that group has the largest cap. It's the greater of the highest HMO and the PERS choice PPO for the cap. And at retirement, this tier, the first tier, gets 100% of that cap. They get, I shouldn't say it quite that way, they really get the lesser of the premium that they've elected in the plan and the cap set here. The second tier, for those kind of between 2002, hired between 2002 and 2009, they have the same basic cap, but they need to get to 20 years of service, CalPERS service, that is, to get that cap. At 10 years of service, they would get half of the cap applied towards their benefit. And finally, the final tier, Tier 3, hired after January 1 of 2009. The cap is different here. It's the lesser now of the lowest HMO and the PERS choice PPO. And then they need 25 years of service to get the full cap.
Might we just keep kibitzing here a little bit? There's also factors relate to the dependents and their coverage as well, which impacts these numbers.
That's right. And so the caps, meaning the caps actually vary dependent on your coverage level, and they vary depending on whether you have single coverage, dual, or family, and also pre and post Medicare. That's right. Oh. Okay. And that's the medical benefit. There are also dental and vision, life insurance benefits provided to retirees. This is, maybe 10% of the overall cost, so this is not a huge driver of the plan, but I just thought I'd mention that there are, for those hired before 2009, dental and vision benefits, and some life insurance benefits too. Overall, you look at last year, the benefits that were paid to retirees under the plan were, these numbers in thousands of dollars, $2.2 million in total. There is one other kind of esoteric benefit, if you will. If you look at this chart here, that's showing across the x-axis there is age. The arrow there is pointing to kind of this is a sample premium, might be $600 for single coverage. And what we've done and we're required to do in the valuation is not just look at the premium that's being paid, but look at the $600 premium that's being paid, but look at this upslope line here, which is really kind of the cost by age. This is, again, kind of a little bit of an esoteric discussion. It's something called the implied subsidy. It is, anywhere from probably 10 to 15% of the total costs when you look at the overall plan. In terms of participants on the valuation dates, this is a June 30, 2017 valuation. 217 employees covered in the valuation and 206 retirees that are already receiving payments. The district has pre-funded with what's known as the CERBT, is the CalPERS OPEB Trust. There are three basic options under the trust. The district has chosen to invest with strategy one. You can see the allocations there, 57 target allocations, 57% in global equity, 27% fixed income, and kind of some other amounts there. What we have done is looked at where we think the returns are going to go in the future on that trust. And we've, about 6 months ago, updated our study, and we've kind of gathered data from various investment advisors, including PCA and Wilshire, and kind of developed a model. And we believe that for the portfolio that the district is in, long-term, the return will be 6.75%. So this is really the discount rate that we've used in the current study. It's a drop of a little bit from the discount rate we'd used in the prior study, but that's our recommendation going forward. In terms of the assets, all these slides going forward are in thousands of dollars. So June 30 of 17 on the valuation date, market value of assets was $20.5 million. As you can see in that bottom row, positive returns for the last 2 years in 2015, 16, 16, 17. 0.7%, 10.3%. I know we're sitting here now in June of 2018. I think returns have been pretty good so far this year, but this valuation is back on June 30 of 2017, so the data kind of runs through there. We use for contributions an actuarial value of assets, which is a smooth market value of assets. Market value here is $20.5 million, and then we have the detail here. It's slightly different for actuarial value, $21 million. So we're using the $21 million to determine district contributions in the valuation. This has historical information. The district started pre-funding with this trust back in 08-09. And actually had very fortunate timing on that, because that was a incredibly incredibly poor investment return year there, 08-09. But we see there on the bars are the green bars are contributions. This is again going back to the initial year the district began pre-funding. These are in thousands of dollars. So 08-09, about $5 million was put into the trust. You can see the green bars there, the contributions that have gone in historically. The blue, the top bar, is the investment return that was generated in each year. And as you can see there, really positive returns for all years. There, I think, one minor year with a negative return was so small it doesn't even show up on the chart. But as you see there, 08-09, there was basically a flat return. The purple there on the bottom are the benefit payments that have been coming out of the trust historically. So those have kind of grown over the years, as you might expect. So this has funded status of the plan. We have a few columns here kind of comparing the previous valuation to the current. In the current valuation, the total accrued liability is, again, these are also thousands of dollars, almost $52 million, $51.86 million. The actuarial value of assets, again, that's that $21 million figure. So total unfunded liability of $30.89 million. If you look at, kind of look at this row, this is the funded status, which is measured as the value of the assets divided by the actuarial accrued liability. You can see significant progress just over the last 4 years, 29% funded, June 30, 15, and the second to last column there, 40.5% funded, June 30, 17, and we project about 49% funded in June 30 of 2018. So significant progress being made. As you can see, you can also see that graphically in this slide, which is showing back to the initial valuation. The height of each bar here is the actual accrued liability. So if you look at that right bar there, that has an accrued liability of a little over $50 million. We have the colors within that bar. The blue is the liability for retirees, right, employees of the district that already left and are collecting benefits, and then the green top bar is the accrued liability for actives. And then the red is the asset growth. So you can see continue to make significant progress towards funding the liability. A general trend is the liability will increase over time. You can kind of see that by looking at the height of these bars over time. You know, as the employee population ages and you get more retirees, as premiums continue to increase, you expect the liability to grow. What you do have here is between June 30, 15 and 17, the previous study to the current study, it was really fairly flat. Not much of an increase in the liability. What we have on the following slide is kind of reconciliation of what happened from the previous study to the current. And I'll just kind of run through some of the key drivers here. Premiums actually increased by less than we had expected, so that reduced that liability about $7.4 million. We actually changed the assumption that we used to project premiums going forward to increase the liability by $3.2 million. A mortality improvement scale has come out that actually says people are going to live a little less longer, so that was good news for the plan, probably bad news for all of us in this room, but that dropped the liability by about $1.1 million. And the final, well, we have the discount rate change of $1.5 million. Total, the liability increased by almost $4 million less than we expected. That's on the liability side. Assets actually increased by $1.1 million more than we had anticipated. In part, the key driver here is that the district has kind of made some additional payments to the trust effectively over the last few years. So overall, the unfunded liability is a little over $5 million less than we would have projected based on the previous valuation. Okay, because of that, when you look at where the contributions are going, we have 4 columns here. Each valuation covers 2 fiscal years. This item here that's circled is the contribution for the current year based on the last valuation, $4.1 million. That for next year, based on the new study, is dropping down to about $3.5 million. There's really 2 components to that calculation. There's normal costs, which are benefits accruing for employees, and then there's a payment on the that $31 million unfunded liability. That's, in this case, in that column there, $1.92 million. So that gets to the total of $3.5 million. The unfunded liability in this year is being paid off over about a 21-year period, and here's the following year, $3.6 million. That gets to 20-year amortization of the unfunded liability. So that's a very reasonable time frame to be paying the unfunded liability off. The actual, historical way the district has been paying the contributions, you've actually been kind of accelerating the schedule by a little bit above it to shorten it and pay it down quicker than a 21-year period. We do, on the final slide here, have kind of some information on what things will look like with different discount rates. In this slide, we've taken that unfunded liability, and rather than amortize it over 21 years, we said, what if you go to just a 20-year period, stay with the 6.75% discount rate? That's a $3.6 million contribution. And then what we have, kind of going back in the previous columns, are different discount rates. So you can look at these in a couple different ways. One would be, if you get 6.75% long-term on the trust, then $3.6 million is the ongoing contribution and makes sense. Now, possible, I wouldn't rule it out that we're wrong, right? And that you get something less than that, possibly also get something more. But to the extent, long-term you earn 6.5%, that $3.6 million, the measurement would really be $3.8 million. And we kind of have some samples here of how this would look at 5.5% discount rate. It's $4.5 million contribution, and finally $4.9 million contribution to 5% discount rate. I think there's kind of two ways of looking at this. I guess the other way would be, to the extent the money is invested more conservatively, that might move you from right to left, and that would long-term drive up costs. I mean, ultimately, the benefits are going to be paid from contributions and investment earnings, right? And so, as you drop the discount rate, you've dropped the investment earnings. It means more money has to be put in upfront or currently. So that's the Cliff Notes on the long report. I don't know if there are any questions.
I have some.
Go ahead.
Okay. The board had established, when we did our budget and our rate structure, we had some assumptions that I thought that differ, I believe, with the numbers that you're showing here. We had set a 6.5% discount rate with a payment in initially 15 years, then we modified the rate to go out to 20 years for both PERS and also OPEB. And now we're showing 6.75. And note that when you change any of these variables, there's dramatic, can be surprisingly large swings. On our PERS, when we went from 7.5% to 6.5%, for example, our unfunded liability jumped from $64 million to $94 million.
Right.
$30 million jump just with that 1% change. So big numbers. So the question I have is, does this, your analysis, and this we have fit into the policy that I thought we had drafted at the time we were doing the rates and the budget, which was my understanding was going to be 6.5%, not 6.75.
Sure, that feels like a question for staff. So when we contract with Bartell to develop this valuation for us, they use the assumptions that they feel like, based on their actuarial expertise, that they should use. And based on their study, they believe strategy 1 of SERP will earn a 6.75% discount rate. So that's what they've done in their valuation. Because of the board policy decision, what we've done is we've also asked them to cost these things out at other discount rates, such as the 6.5%, as is shown on the screen. And the numbers that were put into the budget are funded based on a 6.5% discount rate.
Okay, that's helpful. Next, you use AVA with OPEB. PERS has gone to MVA. And there was a study of PERS that showed there was as much as a 14% difference, where the AVA understated the liability by as much as 14% over MVA historically. Why AVA, not MVA?
Yep. So CalPERS did move away from the AVA method, but the thing that they did there was that they also introduced an amortization policy that basically smoothed they went to market value, and they are phasing that cost in over a 5-year period from when they started it, and future changes also will be phased in. So they got rid of their direct asset smoothing, but the contributions are still smoothing the investment returns.
Okay.
So it's just two different ways of looking at kind of an approach to stabilize contributions.
Is there a reason that we're using AVA rather than MVA?
Yeah, to try to stabilize your contributions somewhat, so that if we do have a fantastic year, or something as almost catastrophic as 0809.
Takes on the fluctuation.
Right.
Okay. Next, on the years of payback, one of the other things the board set up in their budget was one time hopefully we can move to 15-year, but 2037 is where we've settled in. I'd love to see it be closer to 2032 as our payoff date. And it's easier to use that because there's a tendency to roll, say 20 years, and that becomes a rolling 20 or 30 years over time. So will the budget also then make an adjustment for a 2037 payoff as opposed to what appears to be a 2040 payoff here?
No, the budget is based on a closed 20-year payoff, and so fiscal year 18-19 would be year 2 of that closed 20-year period.
Right. But again, there seemed to be a disparity between the analysis that was done by Bartel versus what that policy is. So it may require another adjustment.
Right, so I believe the primary or sort of initial numbers from Bartel had us on a 22-year schedule, but the actuaries have also provided us with a fixed 20-year payoff schedule, and that's what the budget numbers are based on, that closed 20-year schedule.
And the next question I have, there's been talk of a Cadillac tax. How will that impact OPEB? If the district is absent, I understand, negotiations, but these are for retirees, where does that come into the equation?
Yeah, so the Cadillac tax ultimately is going to be a pass on to the district. So it's not currently increasing premiums, but to the extent premiums increase above the Cadillac, the premium plan limits that are in the tax code, there will be a Cadillac tax that will apply, and it will be passed on to the agencies in terms of higher premiums. So we do have an assumption built in here to it's taken into account in the valuation. I remember off the top of my head the exact impact it had. It's not a big impact. It's because, again, it's not expected to start to increase premiums till down the road when that limit is actually hit. So it's included in the valuation, but it's not a big impact.
Okay. And it may never happen, but when it does, at least you have to take into account a 40% excise tax on anything above a certain amount, and that certain amount is indexed at a max of 3% increases per year. And it would be wonderful if medical costs are capped at 3% in the real world.
Right, but they're not. Right.
Director Akbari.
Let's see. So, for me, a lot of this is pretty new. I think I followed generally most of what was in the presentation, mainly because I've seen some of the numbers before, sitting down with our finance team. There were actually a lot of acronyms though that I didn't recognize. Maybe you could bring me up to speed, like UAAL, ADC,
Yeah, so
AVA, MVA.
Yeah, they're spread throughout. I think trying to remember in the full report, we usually have a glossary of terms, but let's take, and they're probably throughout. Certainly, let's take this slide. The UAAL is the unfunded actuarial accrued liability. So that's that item there. The third row from the bottom is amortization of the UAAL. So the amortization payment on that unfunded actuarial accrued liability, which was about $30 million at a 6.75% discount rate. So that's what UAAL is. ADC is the actuarially determined contribution. So that is, just the sum of the normal cost and the amortization payment on that unfunded liability. And present PVPB, present value of projected benefits. So the difference between that and the accrued liability, so if you look at the right-hand column in this slide, the actual accrued liability is $51,900,000. Present value of projected benefits, PVPB, is $64.7 million. The difference is the first line is the amount that if you set it aside today and all assumptions were met would be enough to pay for all the benefits for current employees and retirees going forward. The actual accrued liability is just the portion of that total that's been accrued or earned to date. So if you, a simple example might be if you have an employee that's been here for 10 years and you expect them to work 20 years in total, okay? Suppose the present value of projected benefits is $100,000. The accrued liability, because they have 10 years today, expect to have 20 years at retirement, would be half of that. Okay, would be, in that example, $50,000. So it's the portion that's sort of been accrued as of the valuation date.
If I may, staff has not sent the full report to the directors, and we'll certainly be happy to do so. The most efficient way is electronically. And then if any directors would like staff to walk you through the report in detail, the report itself does a pretty good job at explaining some of the concepts, but this actuarial stuff can be complex, and so staff would be happy to walk any director that's interested through the report and bring you up to speed.
Yeah, I will likely take you up on that.
So we will definitely send the report out, can sink your teeth into it, take a look and let us know if you'd like actuarial 101 on, accrued liabilities and benefits. Okay.
Any more comments?
No, I think I'm going to wait to review the that's all.
Director Gunther?
First, I'd like to apologize for being late. Been in Fremont for like half an hour before I got here. And that's coming from San Jose.
Hey, it's 13 miles long.
So, shows you where traffic is today. I appreciate the numbers. Granted, I got in on the tail end of this. And it appears to me that we're going relatively conservatively with our forward, which is fine. Obviously, if we have a hit somewhere, we're going to have to adjust. We had a hit a while back, and we're now adjusting. So we won't be alone in that adjustment, I'm sure. So from what I gather, the numbers are relatively conservative. We're holding on about a 20-year pay down, which I support. And we've done a little bit better. Great. Will we continue to do better? Yeah, we'll see. We won't know. Am I correct in my thinking?
Yes, and I think, again, if I go to, this has actually been paying kind of on a little bit of an accelerated schedule because not all the benefit payments have come out of the trust. And so, even just over a 2-year period, almost an additional $1.1 million was effectively set aside for the benefit. So it is a 21-year schedule, which is, a reasonably good schedule to be on, but you actually are, a little bit a step ahead of that in what's been done.
Our schedule, if we hold where we are, it's about a 20-year schedule, but if we continue to make, if we have an ability to make additional payments, it drops it down faster.
Right.
And yes, I do share lots of Director Akbari's position of, I'll take a look at it, and we'll probably be lost on page 1. So
we'll stand by, and we're here to help.
Get a good, strong
I think it's like
cup of coffee from Pete's.
this is another one of those foreign languages.
Okay, so, thank you for the report. I did go through it at home later on, so I actually we went through it in the committee meeting, and then I actually had to spend a couple of hours really to understand, the fine grain of things here. So I want to link something else to your report this evening, and you don't have the advanced knowledge of this, but under item 6.2.2 on the agenda, which is unfunded liability status report, Herman, I'll give you and Mr. Pryor a copy there, and I'll pass down a copy to each board member here. This is page 226 in the board binder, board package. There's a few copies here for you and staff. So,
John.
the reason I wanted to pull this for the board's attention, public's attention, is that it really illustrates over time, and this is data based on the market value, not the AVA. So what really stood out to me on this, and we've seen previous iterations of this data, is that we were actually in a very healthy position before the Great Recession. And once that hit, it really dropped based on market valuation, the percentage that we were covering of our unfunded liabilities. And over the last few years, despite the strengths of the market, we've been just we've been kind of in a narrow range of trying to maintain our percentage coverage of unfunded liability. And it's very hard for even me to believe this because we've been trying to prepay and we're trying to get ahead of the curve, but the unfunded liability curve keeps growing on us. So here's the second reason I bring this to the attention of the board is we are in the 8th year of an economic recovery. It's the longest recovery since World War II. Most economic recoveries are in the range of 3 to 4 years. So I would have to think we're at some point going to come to a conclusion of this economic cycle. And at that point, we suffer again with the stock market on where the market valuation is. And so I could see us, I'm not saying it will happen, but you could see the same potential effect on the current percentage coverage that we went through when we were up in the 80s and 90s. Last point was, if we look at OPEB, where we have been trying to make advanced funding, you see where we were just back in 2011, the year that I was in my first year on the board, and where we are now. We've made a lot of progress in an 8-year period of time. So anyway, I just wanted to draw our attention to what I think are some of the more foundational economic risks in the.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting to me. It shows, you know, the history of this is completely different between CalPERS and OPEB, right? You're showing that CalPERS took a huge hit, has yet to recover. OPEB, you've made steady progress the whole time. And while those two are true, the other thing that's very different between these two plans is that, you know, if we hit our targets going forward, your OPEB costs are going to be stable, meaning that, you know, the contributions that we're talking about at the, you know, $3.6 million, $3.5, $3.6 million range are expected to stay there. Even if CalPERS hits their targets, your costs are going to escalate. They've built in an escalation to your contributions, so even going forward, this looks very, very different. Your OPEB, there aren't really kind of hidden or deferred costs here, right? And CalPERS, there unfortunately still are.
Mm-hmm. What I would hate to see happen is the stock market goes down 25%, 30% in a correction, and suddenly our market value is down at hovering at 35 or 40% instead of at 65 to 70%. It could happen. So in my opinion, it behooves us, just like Director Gunther was saying, anytime we have a chance, Director Weeda said the same thing, anytime we have a chance where we can prepay something additional, I think it helps us out.
If I could add briefly to that. Our bond ratings, while we feel comfortable with the AAA from Standard & Poor's, which does not look at legacy cost, and Moody's 2 notches down, which does look at legacy cost. But one of the measures that scares me about Moody's is they've said that if you go over 8 times your net present value is more than 8 times your annual payroll, they'll consider to put you on a watch list. And we're running about 6 times our annual payroll between OPEB and PERS right now. So we've got, the numbers are sobering. And if we can start paying those off, I think will be important for us to proceed.
Those are all the comments I had. Anything more?
So if the board does not have any questions for Mr. Pryor, any further questions, have a safe trip home. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got one copy for Mr. Lamos, too, because I knew he would be interested.
And, Mr. President, if you'd like to go back to item 5.9.
Yes. So, Director Gunther, we had a request from Director Weed to pull item 5.9 from the consent calendar as it was approved. And it was necessary to have 4 people here to take a vote on that item. So should we reopen it for discussion so that Director Gunther is familiar with what?
I think that's appropriate.
Okay. So we'll turn it back to Director Weed.
Well, I had raised a couple of questions on the item. The first was a procedure, was a substantive issue relating to the study that was going to be done, and whether or not the option of being able to turn water supply on and off remotely can be done with the battery, that this multi-decade battery that we're talking about, which like a battery in a watch, or turning a valve takes some pressure. Will it require augmented electrical service? And if it does, shouldn't we be looking at that also in our survey, because that will be a major cost factor as we go forward under the options. The other ones related to the comments, so related to the whole process of going with AMI and the current time frame, given the rapidly evolving technology. And also, I felt that we could achieve in the interim the financial objectives by merely billing monthly and reading quarterly or every 4 months, given the current situation where we have adequate water supply. It's not a critical element at this point, and we have overcapacity. So it's not a, and then a third point was that we had developed a pilot project that we never implemented, and I'd like to see, I think would be benefit us all if for the large 400 customers, if we were to provide them that information with the understanding it doesn't have to be tied to the rates. Breaking that bond is really, I think, will allow us to do some extraordinary things and make a far more efficient operation. And it's driven by a concept, faith-based policy, that you have rate-based conservation. Fortunately, we don't have tiers, so we have flexibility in adjusting and working with our rate schedules. So that was my take. As a result, I was going to say that I believe we'll eventually get to AMI. I would like to see us take a more, I'll call it prudent timeline than the 5 years as identified here. So I'll be abstaining.
Okay, so we need to take a vote of the board, and I will turn, unless you have.
I can move
Sorry.
staff recommendation if you so desire.
I will second. Thank you.
Okay. Directors Gunther,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Huang, Weed,
Abstain.
and Sethy.
Aye. So we'll go back to our action calendar, and we'll turn to item 5.12.
Thank you, Mr. President. 512 involves the fiscal year 2018-19 budget and the 25-year capital improvement program for mid-cycle revisions. So since the board has already had the pleasure of diving into the budget and CIP in detail, we do have an abbreviated presentation for members of the public this evening, and I will turn this over to Mr. Wunderlich.
All right, thank you, Mr. Shaver. On June 8th of last year, the Board of Directors adopted the two-year budget for fiscal year 2017-18 and fiscal year 2018-19, and the 25-year capital improvement program. As part of the district's two-year budget cycle, the board reviews and adopts mid-cycle revisions to the budget in the CIP at the end of the first fiscal year. The proposed mid-cycle revisions were reviewed at the May 15th, 2018 Finance Committee meeting and May 22nd, 2018 budget workshop. Review and adoption of the updated fiscal year 2018-19 budget and 25-year CIP will help meet strategic plan goals 3.2, ensure cost reasonableness, and 3.3, promote financial transparency. The staff recommendation this evening is by motion to adopt a resolution amending the fiscal year 2018-19 budget in the 25-year capital improvement program, as was presented at the workshop and will be reviewed this evening by Mr. Chen, our rates and budget manager. So with that quick overview, I will now turn it over to Mr. Chen for a presentation.
Good afternoon, President Sethy, members of the board. As John mentioned, the budget presentation is not changing from the May 22nd budget workshop. There's only one slight difference, which is the budget document that's included in your board packet is rounded to the nearest 100. And that's how we typically do our budget document. I'm having technical difficulties as well. Oh, there we go. Took a minute. The district operates on a two-year budget cycle. We are in the dark blue circle. That's the adopting budget amendments. It's the last task of a two-year cycle. We will start a new two-year cycle, 1920 and 2021, in early December. Before I go over the proposed budget, I wanted to go over some key budget assumptions. The first one being a projected water rate increase of 3% for 18-19. This is a placeholder. Staff is currently in the process of developing water rates for 2019. We will be coming back to the board in July 26 to review water rate structures and seek board guidance. Another budget assumption is SFPUC has indicated through the last BOSCA update that they do not intend to increase the wholesale water rates through 21-22. So we have a 0% increase on our water SFPUC costs for next year. One significant change from the adopted to the proposed for AMI, Advanced Metering Infrastructure, is that in the adopted we had a $25 million debt issuance. In the current financial planning model, we are assuming a pay-go for AMI, which is we will pay it out of our general fund. For 18-19, the CIP has about $1.5 million budgeted for AMI. One of the things that Director Wee was talking about the 20-year payoff and a 6.5% discount rate for our unfunded liabilities, that's what that last bullet is. We have sort of two buckets. We have our normal contributions, and that's what Doug was talking about, which is the normal per valuation amount. On top of that, we do advanced funding. So that's what we do on top of our normal contributions to get to the policy that the board set of 6.5% discount rate and a 20-year payoff.
May I make an editorial suggestion that you make that a 2037 payoff schedule? Because that, as we saw from the last presentation, those 20 years have a tendency to slide.
Sure. Yeah, the intention is it's a closed 20-year and not an open 20-year, not a rolling 20-year. We can make that, we can clarify that. So this is just advanced, like I mentioned, this is just advanced funding. So for pension, it's $2.8 million, and for OPEB, it's $215,000. So you can see there's quite a big difference between the two. I'll go over that when we go over the proposed budget, but just something to keep a note of for now. Another big budget assumption is our bill forecast demand. We are projecting 35.2 MGD for next fiscal year. That's about 2.2 higher than what we had adopted a year ago, which was a little under 33 MGD. That will bring in quite a bit more water revenue, and again, I will go over that when we when we do the budget comparison slide. California Water Fix, in the financial plan currently, we are assuming it's funded through water rates. That's a policy decision that will be evaluated later, but for the purposes of next year's budget, we're assuming it's funded through water rates based off of a 40-year debt issuance at a 4% interest rate. Now, the California Water Fix cost has a very slow ramp-up, so that's why for fiscal year 18-19, the cost is about $300,000. It will slowly increase every year for like the next 10, 15 years, but for the initial year, it's pretty low. On top of the California Water Fix cost, we have gap funding. It's a monthly payment of about $38,000 over calendar year 2019. So only half of that, $459,000, is budgeted for 18-19. The other half will be included when we do our next 2-year budget cycle.
Is that a worst-case scenario? Because there were suggestions that that might be on the property tax bill, as we currently have the state water project.
It's our conservative scenario. Again, this is not something the board has discussed in terms of budget. We will evaluate it as a part of our next 2-year budget. For the financial planning model, we're including it just on water rates, just to be conservative at this point. The last budget assumption I want to mention is a few proposed staffing changes. Is the deletion of 3 FTEs, 1 office assistant, 2, and 2 treatment facility operators. Thing to note about that is the treatment facility operators were authorized, but they were unfunded in the budget. We're proposing an addition of 3 FTEs, 1 treatment facility operator trainee, 1 engineering tech 1-2, and 1 emergency response security position. The emergency response security position has not been defined yet. Staff will be coming back to the board once that classification is created. And lastly, 2 defined term, 2-year defined term positions that will be funded entirely out of customer job revenue and not water rates. One is a construction inspector 1-2, and 1 is an engineering tech 1-2. I'm going to take a brief pause here because I believe Mr. Peterson had some additional comments regarding the staffing.
Yes, I wanted to provide the additional information that Mr. Chen was referring to on the new security emergency response position. So after the May 22nd board workshop, Mr. Shaver, Ed Stevenson, and I met and discussed, along with a subsequent briefing with Stephen N., on how best to create a cross-departmental team for proceeding with hazard mitigation and emergency response strategic planning. The major outcome of the discussion was a decision to designate the newly proposed emergency response and security position with the responsibility of developing and maintaining emergency response procedures and emergency response preparedness plans. The newly proposed full-time FTE will also be responsible for assisting with emergency preparedness training and exercise program, disaster mitigation grants, physical security plans for protecting district infrastructure and employees, and acting as a backup for the emergency response and security officer. The proposed new FTE will work closely with consultants and district staff to evaluate water system modeling scenarios for the purposes of developing operational guidelines for mitigating the effects of disasters and post-disaster recovery operations. Capital projects identified and recommended as a result of the disaster evaluation analysis, such as the installation of seismically actuated isolation valves and the need for additional emergency backup power facilities, would then be considered for inclusion in the capital improvement program. The next step, provided the board approves the new position, will be to recruit for a person with technical and emergency planning expertise who will be sufficiently capable of performing the tasks just described. And in the meantime, the current emergency response and security officer will be proceeding with the updating of the district's business continuity plan that is included in the board's 5-year strategic plan
and was included in the fiscal year 18-19 CIP update presented to the board at the last board workshop. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
As one has been fairly vocal in this item, it has always struck me that ACWD required a true planning function for an approach toward contingency operations. My view is a different type of engineering entirely from what we've historically done with capital and O&M. And while augmenting the staff work at the current, within ops and capital improvement, engineering staff is important. My concern is that the challenge of doing planning on a district-wide basis might be better suited in a traditional planning water resources area than at the local level. But that is at the point of just general guidance. Is management and staff's way to, we can throw out ideas and concerns, but it's staff's job is to execute. So I'll leave it at that.
Any comments?
None so far.
Anything?
Well, seeing it's been raised, I'm satisfied. This is definitely across the board, and in this day and age, it's now become important. There are individuals out there, I think, that can meet our needs, and it's definitely going to be, I think you're going to have to find somebody who's going to be very trained to be able to do that. Good luck with finding the person. I'm sure they're there, and I appreciate you moving forward.
Herman, if we can back up in the slide here, right on this slide.
Oh, this
No,
one?
that slide, but where we have the demand forecast.
Yes.
Third bullet. When I went through this in the board packet, it kind of struck me that when we did our outlook, financial long-term outlook, we were recognizing that we may have an increase in demand coming out of the drought, right? And then it kind of goes up at a sustainable, small incremental increase. But I wondered whether you have now factored into that long-term forecast, the governor signing the, recent SB 623 and AB 1668, which is going to force us to encourage more conservation. So maybe we're somewhere in between, is what I was thinking.
That may be true. One of the things that we do on the financial planning side is we are conservative. We do a 10% below our new normal, for example, and we have a fairly slow ramp up. We do not do that with those, SB factored in. It's something we do need to look at going forward.
So I'll add to that Mr. Chen and I did coordinate with our water resources staff after that legislation was passed, and our initial conclusion was that the earliest any of those requirements could impact our projected water demand would be in 2025. So we felt like for purposes of concluding this budget process, we did not need to make any changes. But it's something that we will be working closely with the water planning group on and making updates as warranted.
Yeah, I certainly didn't think it would affect anything short-term. That's why I said in our long-term horizon. And Mr. Lemos brought it up, too. So by 2030, we're down to 50 gallons per capita per day.
Yeah, so just, we have an item to provide an update on the making conservation a way of life in California later in the agenda. But since we're discussing that now, the thresholds, whether it's 55 going down to 50 gallons per person per day, is being reported in some super conservative news outlets incorrectly. What that reflects is the goals for indoor water use only, not outdoor water use. And some media outlets have been saying things like you won't be able to take a shower and do laundry on the
Right.
same day. That's incorrect. The outdoor water conservation requirements are still yet to be determined by the State Water Resources Control Board and the Department of Water Resources. That might impact our planning more, but it's unclear yet what those requirements will be. So we'll closely follow that and keep the board informed as we project our finances as well.
Okay. Good to hear that.
Almost a rhetorical comment here. Your prior employer was Dublin San Ramon Services District,
Correct.
which took a relatively aggressive approach toward paying off OPEB.
Yes.
I think it would be beneficial at some time to in a different form, possibly as we work through this, to visit what Dublin San Ramon did to try and accelerate their payments on OPEB. And essentially, when they had a really good year, like we had a really good year this year, put additional funds toward that, those payoffs. As I recall, our budget last year in discussions and when we talked about rate increases, we decided we went from a 25 and 5 to a 20 and 5 by just saying, well, we'll kick the OPEB and PERS payments down another 5 years. And there was no analysis, it was just the quick compromise. So it was pointed out earlier this evening in the documents Director Sethy provided how vulnerable those projections are. A lot of hopes and prayers, but if we're getting it, finding a mechanism and maybe taking a look at what Dublin San Ramon's formula was and their approach toward addressing the issue might be beneficial.
Okay.
And I think we'll be able to do that when we talk about rates as part of our overall financial planning.
Are you done with your slides there?
We're like halfway,
Oh, okay.
so I will.
I'll have a future comment. Here.
Okay, let me just speed through the rest of it real quick. This is our budget comparison. This is comparing our proposed budget against our adopted budget from a year ago. I'm just going to start from the top and kind of work my way down and kind of highlight a certain few things. The first is you can see our beginning cash balance improved about $18 million from 120 million to 138. This is due to underspending in both the operating capital budget, higher than budgeted water sales, as well as higher development activity. So we started off the year better than we will start the year better than what we had originally budgeted for. A couple of the revenues I would like to point out is water revenues. Remember I mentioned that we are updating our bill demand forecast and going up about 2 MGD. That's reflected in the water revenue line by an improvement of about $4 million. You can see on the property tax proceeds, it went down. I want to link that with our O&M expenses going down as well. One of the biggest expense changes we had was the State Water Project did a reconciliation that lowered costs going forward. And since our property tax collects through the property tax override, the groundwater portion of State Water Project, the property tax also went down in conjunction. So they're linked together. On other revenue, you can see it went up about $2.7 million. That's due to the district's grant awards that we got this year that will be expended next year. So that's mainly due to the grants. And so you can see overall total revenue improved about $6.5 million. On the expense side, I talked about the State Water Project. The other thing I wanted to mention was you can see the OPEB advanced funding and the pension advanced funding. The pension advanced funding went up slightly, but the OPEB advanced funding went down a lot. And that's due to what Doug was saying earlier about their assumptions for the valuation. Their assumptions was a 22-year payoff at a 6.75% discount rate. That's very, very close to our 6.5 and 20-year payoff. And that's why the advanced funding, the additional amount we put on top of our normal contribution is so much smaller on the OPEB side compared to the pension side. As a comparison, on the pension side, the discount rate is 7.375% and a 30-year payoff.
I'm sorry, but I thought I was told that even though we did this analysis, we were going to stick with our budgeted numbers and run with those, which would increase the amount of payment, not
Yes,
decrease.
this 215,000 is just advanced funding portion. On top of that, there's another 3.6, which is our normal contribution. So
But even the 2.6, and I was proposing that we take another couple of $1 million and throw it in on top of it this year as well.
right.
That's-
So that's one of the things that came out of the last May budget workshop, which is there are a few things about that we wanted to defer until our next two-year cycle. One of them was additional acceleration of payoff of our unfunded liabilities. And that was what the board gave us guidance to do.
So we talked about this in in the Finance Committee, John, Director Weed, and I think we agreed that we would make this smaller advance funding of around 300,000 on OPEB in order to make a much larger contribution on the pension side. Is that right? No.
That's not what came out of it.
That wasn't what
Then I
was.
got it wrong.
So staff's suggestion during the workshop was, there are a number of things that the board may choose to do with the revenue and the reserves that we have available to us. We're in the second year of a two-year budget. We'll be going into the rate cycle, and in our view, that would be the appropriate time that if the board wants to get on a different trajectory with advance payments or look at how we want to fund certain things through debt or through the general fund, or to look at rates, everything goes together. So having all those dials in front of the board at the same time so that you can reach consensus on what the best overall path for the district is, that was our recommendation at the time of the budget workshop, and our impression was that there was general acceptance among the directors to go that way, with the proviso that in a future board workshop, which won't be too far away, because we're going to spin into rates and the budget again, that we look at all of these issues together and work with the board to determine the best way
I
forward.
think I misstated myself here. So we have a much smaller number that we agreed to for the OPEB advance funding, but the pension advance funding, we were keeping at 2.8 million, or a little bit above the prior year's budget. Because we were looking at use of our cash, right? And so Director Weed and I asked, well, why are we not making more on the OPEB side? But we're making certainly an adequate advance funding of 2.8 million in the budget for the pension side. And so we're trying to help clarify why we're making a much smaller contribution on the OPEB side for the time being.
My recollection of that meeting was that we had $8 million to the positive that was a bit of a surprise. It was a pleasant surprise. And with that $8 million, might we look at what we did last year, which was to put an extra $2 million toward OPEB? Why shouldn't we, and one of my suggestions, could we not look at putting another $2 million this year toward OPEB to help pay it down, realizing that we had, at the last budget hearing, extended it from 15 years to 20 years on the payoff, from 2032 to 2037.
Right.
So but the bottom line comes again to the Dublin-San Ramon approach. If you've got extra money, might you put it toward legacy costs?
Director Weed, you brought real clarity there to what our discussion was. So, yeah, we were looking at, we've got this extra $8 million, why not pre-fund it to a greater degree?
And the other thing I just want to remind the board about that we talked at the workshop was demand has been higher than what we were anticipating, and to a large extent, that's that better financial situation. However, we don't know whether that curve is going to continue. So the idea was we're going into the warmer weather period, we'll get more clarity, and again, before making a decision on one piece of the mosaic in the second year of a budget. We have time. Why not allow staff to come back with all the issues? Because there's still a lot of uncertainty about water revenue with just one summer behind us. So that was what we made the pitch for at the budget workshop, and the slides that Mr. Chen are showing you today reflect sort of that careful approach overall.
I support the approach right now.
So, so basically what you're saying is our goal is the same, is the 20-year payback at 6.5%. The dollar difference is based on how...
The current valuations.
The current valuations, right. So the approach is the same, status quo. We are not actually decreasing anything.
We are not
Right.
accelerating or decelerating our 20-year 6.5% discount
And we
rate.
will postpone that discussion until we actually work out
Which
our
is
next
like
budget.
December,
Okay.
basically, so.
Got it, thank you.
Right, and if I might add just one point of clarification, the previous amounts that we had put forward were based on a staff analysis of what we thought the advanced funding would need to be on that closed 20-year schedule. We've now had our actuary create a formal actuarial analysis to tell us what those amounts need to be. And as it turns out, we got it pretty close on the pension side, but not quite as close on the OPEB side.
Because we didn't factor in that Bartel was going to lower their discount rate down to 6.75. When John mentioned staff, I was basically the one that did the calculation last time, and I assumed the 7.25 discount rate for future years. I wasn't expecting them to lower it, so that's why I was off.
But the Moody's stress test is 6%. Okay. All right.
Okay, continuing on, total expenses are down, will decrease, or proposed to decrease about $4.6 million. The last thing I want to mention about this slide is the second to last row, which is the net of revenues and expenses. When we adopted the budget a year ago, we expected a decrease to our ending balance of about $7.6 million. The proposed budget is an increase to our ending balance of $3.5 million to a total of $142. So it's a pretty big swing that Director Sethy and Weed had mentioned. This next slide is our district reserves and debt indicators. Two things I want to mention about this is this table is based off of the reserve policy, the old reserve policy. We just adopted a revised reserve policy as item 5.10. Regardless of which reserve policy we use, we are meeting the targets with the proposed budget. And the third to last line of debt service coverage, you can see it's at a 455% and proposed at 667%. By policy, we have a 200% target, and by our covenants, it's 125%. So we are well above that. This slide, this pie chart, is basically the same data as from the previous slides, but just sliced a little differently. It's just the general fund expenses and excludes customer job expenditures. It's probably a little hard to see, but it's really just to emphasize how each of our cost centers, there's a labor component. So for example, the purple slide, you can see there's there's a shaded one and a non-shaded one. The shaded one is the labor component for water treatment and distribution, and non-shaded is the non-labor portion. And it's really just to emphasize that water doesn't treat itself or distribute itself. There's a labor component involved. This next slide is our proposed CIP. This is not the entire 25-year CIP. It's just the first 10 years. And you can see sort of the priority projects where we're spending the most money in for, to say, from 1819 through 2122 is the sort of turquoise, which is AMI, the purple, which is Fish Passage, and then the lime green, which is main renewal. So those are sort of the near-term projects that the CIP is focused on. I'm going to end my presentation going over sort of the 4 metrics that I always go over when I do the budget and when I do rates. The top chart is the last metric that the board saw when they adopted the budget a year ago. The bottom one is the proposed. One difference between the two is the red line, which is the reserve targets. The top chart is the old reserve policy. The bottom one is the new one that was just recently adopted. Either way, you can see that our general fund ending balances are above the red line. Our slimmest year is 2022, which is about $3 million above the target. This next metric is our debt coverage. You can see the red line is our 200% policy. It doesn't show the 125% by covenant. You can notice that fiscal year 2020 has a slight dip. That's due to a $10 million set aside for Los Vaqueros reservoir expansion. It's a placeholder until we know what the true costs are. And you can also see, even with that in place, we recover the following year, and we're well above the 200%. This next metric is our revenue versus operating expenses, whether our operating revenues will cover our operating expenses, including depreciation. When we adopted the budget, the target for when we kind of got there was fiscal year 2020. With the proposed budget, you can see we're there now. There's only one slight dip in fiscal year 2020, and again, that's the Los Vaqueros $10 million set aside. The last metric is our rate revenue against our revenue requirement. So this is whether our rate and charge revenue will meet our revenue requirement, including debt service. That hasn't really changed between the adopted and the proposed. We expect to reach that point in 2023. My last slide is the staff recommendation. It's to adopt a resolution amending the fiscal year 18-19 budget as presented. And getting to Director Sethy and Director Weed's point, there are a number of things that we would like to evaluate as part of our next 2-year cycle. AMI financing options, as I mentioned. AMI is pay-go currently, but that's while staff evaluates financing options. The California fixed cost allocation, again, in the financial planning model, we are funding it entirely through water rates. Whether we want to do part of it on a property tax bill, that's it for a later discussion. Los Vaqueros, once we have a little bit of idea of what that cost is going to be, we would program that in. And then acceleration of our pension OPEB liabilities, that's for when we do our next 2-year cycle. The last bullet is to maintain the budget assumptions, the ones I just mentioned, for 18-19, because, as Bob mentioned, of the uncertainty of whether our bill water demand continues on the same trajectory as we experienced this last year. And staff is available for questions.
Could we start off at this end this time? So, at last month's meeting, we were talking about repairs to the South Bay Aqueduct, what might be necessary in terms of a 3-way partnership between Zone 7, ACWD, Santa Clara Valley Water District. As part of the next 2-year budget development process, I would think that we would want to allocate some study dollars toward that. And then longer term, it would be interesting to ballpark what we think the cost of repairs are to that element of the system, because that could be a pretty big capital cost moving forward.
Okay.
And I think we want to factor that in, through the 1920s, whatever that is.
Okay.
I'd like to go back to one slide you have on debt per property owner.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so we have debt per customer and debt per capita. I think we have a history of this data in the appendices, one of them of our annual CAFRs.
I think we do. I'm not.
I think I've seen it before.
I believe we do, yes.
Every year.
And the stats table's in the back, yeah.
One statistic in our CAFR. It might be interesting to put this in a graph historically,
Okay.
you know, where it's been, and then what I'm interested in is for every major new capital project that we have, like AMI, well, that's not going to be debt financed, but anything that's debt financed, if you could just put that as an incremental overlay, well, what does that mean per customer, per
Okay.
capita for the community? I'm thinking back, there was a recent newsletter, most of us are aware of it, where USD put out a newsletter talking about the potential for recycled water and how much that would cost per property owner. And it was over $1,000 per property owner, so if you figure 85,000 property owner, 85,000 customers, that was 85 million. We know some of those costs could be even much higher than that. So if you were debt financing a recycling plant, and we talked about a proposal that is being worked on right now, I think it's important to put that in a perspective that customers can understand that their debt obligation per household, per property owner is X today. If we work on another project, whatever it might be down the road, it's going to add this much of a obligation to you as a property owner. And if we work on Los Vaqueros, it's going to be this much more. So these things can start adding up over time. And I think if the board had a good historical graph of what the debt obligation is per customer per capita, and then where we expect it to go, that would be really helpful.
Okay.
Those are my two comments.
The question regarding, this is more towards what, the budget workshop we canceled, there was a line item in there that was near and dear to me. Is that going to be picked up then in the next workshop?
Yeah, so all of the rates-related topics, and I believe you're probably talking about meters upsized for fire flows.
Correct.
Those rate-related topics will all be covered at the July 26th workshop.
Okay, so I'm looking at July 26.
Yes.
Okay. I'm actually satisfied with what I see here. I can live with the numbers. They're right what we asked you to do. I certainly could see addressing, adding more money to the unfunded liability, but that's not what we asked you to do. And this is where it is. It's still holding to those numbers, and this is a mid-cycle budget, and could be, maybe we're having a growing pain that mid-cycling, how do you address something that maybe changes that way? So I'm perfectly fine with the way staff has gone with this, and we'll support it.
So I'm on board with the budget as well as presented. I'm really happy that we've been able to go from to a budget surplus, right? I think that's a positive step for our agency. Can we go to slide?
It took a hard vote last year to get there.
I understand. Can we go to slide 9, please?
9.
I have a question on the. Is there like a board policy or a legal concern in terms of how much we have in reserves?
Legal concern? We have a board policy that sets our reserve targets.
Right.
and we don't, it's a minimum. We don't have a maximum target. I don't believe there is a legal concern.
Yeah, if I may, the reserves are set by board policy. There's one small component of the total reserve amount that's dictated by bond covenants, where we have to maintain a certain, like, debt service reserve. So that I would view as a legal requirement of those bond documents. But otherwise, it's set by board policy, and we have a series of different sort of reserve funds, like an operating reserve, capital reserve, and like a rate stabilization reserve, and each of those are set as minimums. And so the red line you see on this chart is sort of the summation of those minimums.
And to add to what John was saying, the one debt reserve we have is for our 2009 bond. Our 2012 and 2015 did not require that, so we only have a debt reserve for 2009, and that will be that will reach maturity in a few years.
I think that's it for now. Thank you.
I am actually fine with the budget revision as proposed, adhere to our discussion at workshop and all the policies and goals that we have established. I do look forward to having a slightly more interesting discussion in the July workshop.
Okay. Well, it's great to be in the black. For years, we had a net operating loss. And I think back only 2 years ago, when at the end of June, we adopted a budget that included a 25% rate increase and still had a $14 million net operating loss. Now, we ended that year with a $6 million net operating profit, so it was a $20 million fluctuation. But it brings to mind that one of the metrics we may want to establish is how the budget being a planning document, how valid is our planning document, and how can we, and have we been able to find ways that we can be far more predictive of what our revenue flows and financing is going to be, both income and extra. Part of that will hopefully be a revision of our rate structure to balance our expenses, our variable expenses with our variable income. We've got a ways to go on that. But, so thank you for your work, and we'll keep, it's a work in process. Thank you.
Thank you.
So
We need to,
we are requesting board action.
Before we go to any board action, I believe there may be a comment from the public on this item.
right. Mr. Lemos, please come forward.
Well, it's nice to know you're in the black, Mr. Weed. I don't know. Talking from where I'm at, which is the people in my district or in my area, don't agree with you. But anyway, I made some notes, and I'm going to read them, not disrespectful. It says, I have not been to any of the workshops, so please excuse my ignorance. Most people look to you to keep costs down so that their bills will not keep going up, as expressed in last year's February 17, what the people came here. There was only, what, 6,000 people that disagreed with you. But anyway, out of the 300,000 people that live in this area, I thought it was, well, anyway, that was something that you or I can't control, what people are doing and thinking. And it looks as if we're looking at another increase in the near future. According to this article by Lara in The Voice, and then you were talking about all these things about Barcados and all these little incidents of upgrades. And Mr. Sethy, you also said something about the government wanting $8 on that. So on top of that, our bills are going to go up too. So I was just wondering, I look at all this panel up here, and I was just wondering what the forefathers of this company would be thinking of what's going on with this company. Because I think that they thought of the people before they thought of this company. And that's why we were always in the red. Other than that, I don't have any more comments because I'm done. I'm done. All these rates, government, all the utilities are all going up. And as I said before, my pension, when they said that they were going to cut our rates, or, you know, they asked the Treasury Department if they could cut. The Treasury Department said no. Well, that was okay as far as that went. But that also brought the years that they would have to pay us. That means that in 2025, I won't be getting a pension from my company because that company has now moved on. They've also added another pension board to that. The pension that I have is going to go, I guess, to the Treasury Department and give us pennies on our dollar. So that's why I say I don't have that many years. I mean, I'm going to have 20. I'm 80 now. But I just wonder what it's going to be like. I've gone to Arizona to look at the property there. $160,000 buys a house. I could sell my house for 80. And that's what my wife wants to do. So I don't know what we're going to do. Because everything keeps going up here in California. Governor Brown wants to build a pipeline, going to billions of dollars. And I can't even get a $600 pension. Well, don't bring out the violins, please. But thank you for the work you guys are doing. I think it's great. You brought the company up. You're doing fine. That's great. I thank you for your time.
Mr. Lemos, thank you for your comments. I know it's not standard for us to reply, but I'd like to make
Oh, this is on the agenda. You can reply.
I'm not going to express an opinion here or disagree with you on an opinion, but Mr. Chen was presenting factual information on what has led to a surplus this year. For the first time in over a decade, we have our best financial performance. A large part of that, as he's pointed out in the presentation, is due to the reduction in costs that we had throughout the district this past year. That was a significant contributor, holding the line, holding the head count, and reducing costs throughout the district. That's supported by the slides that we just went through.
Down here, we don't know all of that. We don't know what's going on with the company. You know, you talk about letting everybody know what's happening, and it isn't true. You spend money, and you have all these meetings. Nobody wants to go to because you have them at 4 o'clock. Who wants to come here and listen to a lot of talk that may happen, may not happen? Because they want to go home and see their families and rest. Like my mailman, he said the other day it was so hot, he said the only thing I want to do is go home and take my shoes off. Don't bother me. And that's the way people are that make a little bit of money. I mean, you know, living wage, but anyway, I don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, thank you very much for your comments. We do listen to what you have to say, all right? So I would entertain a motion on...
Actually, can I make a comment?
Sure.
So I want to say thank you, Mr. Ramos, for reminding us that we do represent our customers. So I do thank you for your presence and your comment.
I'd like to make one too. Do not lose hope. A couple of the things in there I think you referenced, one was the $8 additional by the government on the water bill. I think you're referencing the potential state. We're fighting that as best we can. We do not support that at all. And we're fighting it for just like, what you've had to say. We hear it. We appreciate your comments. I hear it. Don't lose hope. The twin tunnels are actually going to help us, and it wasn't anywhere near as bad as I thought it was going to be, and that's actually being built into the budget. So that was something, like I said, I expected it to be much worse than it actually was, and we could talk about that at another time. But please don't stop. Don't lose hope. Your comments are well received, and they have an effect. Thank you.
If I may, since the issue of the proposed water tax has come up, today both houses of the legislature approved the 2018-19 budget, and the water tax was proposed to be in a budget trailer bill. That did not make it. So as a result of, I think, some of your lobbying in Sacramento, our local representatives did not strongly support the water tax on the water bill, and that water tax was not in this year's state budget. So that was a win for the water community. For now, it will likely be back.
So if there are no more comments, I would like to make a motion.
Go ahead.
I would like to make a motion to support staff recommendation.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Directors Gunther,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Sethy.
Aye. So we'll turn to item 5.13, and I'm going to request a break after we get through this item, if I may, for 15 minutes.
Sure. And I am noticing that although the agenda is correct, in the staff reports, it looks like we have two 5.12s. So that's a typo on the second one. So I will be covering the second 5.12 staff report, and we'll correct that for the meeting minutes. So I'll go through this very quickly because it is complicated. In September 2015, Governor Brown signed SB 107, a bill which required the consolidation of redevelopment agency oversight boards by July 1st, 2018. Upon consolidation, there'll be a new single countywide redevelopment oversight board for each county, and this is happening for all the counties throughout the state. The Independent Special District Selection Committee, ISDSC, is responsible to make the appointments of the one independent special district regular member and one special district designated alternate to serve on the new countywide redevelopment oversight board. And this is important because decisions are going to be made regarding property tax revenue and the implications to special districts like ACWD. So it's good that there's one representative from special districts on the oversight board. Nominees to the Countywide Redevelopment Oversight Board must be members of the legislative bodies of the independent special districts that are eligible to receive property tax distributions, and therefore all of you are eligible. The LAFCO Interim Executive Director has scheduled an ISDSC meeting on Wednesday, July 11th at 9:30 a.m. in Hayward. And the ISDSC is comprised of the presiding officers of each of the independent special districts in the county. And as board president, Director Sethy is the district's default representative, as long as he is able to attend. And at the time of the drafting of the staff report, President Sethy indicated that he will be able to attend. If this situation changes in between now and when the meeting occurs, the ACWD board may appoint one of its members to act as the designee in the event something happens that impacts President Sethy's ability to attend. And I need to inform the LAFCO interim executive director of the representatives by Friday, July 6th. Now, should an ACWD board member wish to serve on the new countywide redevelopment oversight board, a board resolution is required to formally nominate a board member, and then ACWD would provide written notice to all of the 14 other independent special districts that are eligible to serve. There's no specified expiration date for the term. However, appointees serve at the pleasure of the ISDSC, so that can change. And President Sethy has indicated that he's interested in serving as either the independent special district regular member or the alternate on the countywide redevelopment oversight board. So, should President Sethy still be interested and or another ACWD board member wish to serve, then what we need to do is also revise the current board's compensation and reimbursement policies so that this would be considered service at the request of the board. So there's really two recommendations. The first recommendation is should act this evening to designate the alternate, just in case something happens. And then the second and third recommendations kind of depend if there's a director interested in serving on the countywide redevelopment oversight board. If there are no ACWD directors interested in doing that, then no action is required by the board. So the recommendation in a formal sense is by motion, 1, in the event that President Sethy cannot attend, select the designee who will attend the Independent Special District Selection Committee election meeting and vote on behalf of the Alameda County Water District for the Independent Special District regular member and designated alternate on the Countywide Redevelopment Oversight Board. And then 2, adopt a resolution nominating an ACWD board member for the Countywide Redevelopment Oversight Board regular member and an ACWD board member for the alternative member, should directors be interested in serving in those roles. And 3, authorize the attendance and compensation of directors to attend Independent Special District Selection Committee and Countywide Redevelopment Oversight Board meetings as may be required in their designated roles. So that's what's on your plate for now, and staff and council are available to respond to any questions.
On the advice of general counsel, should we take this as 3 separate motions?
You don't have to. It's really up to the board, but you should identify the alternate, which is the first recommendation, if you can come to consensus on that. And then the second action is by a resolution. There's a resolution in the board packet where you fill in the blanks of the directors who may be interested. And then the third action is just the compensation vote. So you could, it might be easiest to take them separately just in case there's different people interested in different votes.
Right. So I'm the designee for the first meeting of which is, I call it the organizing meeting, really.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need an alternate, since I'm already committed to go to that meeting. We need an alternate.
Correct.
In the event you cannot attend that meeting.
By statute, it's you. It's
Right.
the presiding officer of the board, so it'd be the president. But if for some reason you get sick or
Right.
you have a conflict, it would be good to identify somebody
Right.
else to go just in case that happens.
And normally, staff would suggest the vice president in that role, but there's nothing in the statute that indicates that that's a requirement.
And I believe we have one director that might have a real conflict of interest. No?
It's interesting.
John, what's your
We're speaking
position?
about a county, all of the redevelopment agency properties throughout. I have a property which is within 500 feet of the one of this Fremont redevelopment.
What about being on the Assessment Appeals Board?
That, come to think, had not been an issue before, but at, be on the super safe side, I'll pass. And we can refer to the attorney if there's an issue there, but
So you own property within 500 feet
of a
this-
successor agency property in the Niles District of Fremont. The redevelopment agency acquired some land in the Niles District, and it's on the other side of a city park.
So the actions tonight are really just to appoint a designee replacement for the present, he can't do it. And then we're going to be talking about, you certainly should not express an interest in being on the oversight board based on what you just described, but I don't see a financial conflict of interest that you would need to not participate in these actions tonight.
The other element's the Assessment Appeals Board, which makes land use evaluation decisions, which may or may not have an implication.
Right. And again, those items aren't before the board tonight. What's on the board tonight is designating your representative on these boards.
Well,
And so you should not say, I want to be on the board. But you do not have, based on this, you can participate tonight if you want to. Now, if you have a common law conflict of interest and you're uncomfortable, you could certainly say that. And
I don't think there's probably not a specific conflict, but there's always once you use the word property and assessments, it's viewed so broadly that there's might be a perception, however correct, that there's a concern. So I'll step
How
out.
about if I make a recommendation of the vice president of the board?
I did look at the date. The date's okay. And so the interest, I will hope for your good health and will accept the alternate position.
Okay.
If so desired by the rest of the board.
Okay, so why don't we try to clear that one off the decks here as a motion?
Certainly. So that would be, in the event that President Sethy cannot attend, select a designee who will attend the Independent Special District Selection Committee election on behalf of the district.
Shall be.
Shall be a Vice President, James Gunther.
And that would be, somebody would make a motion, somebody would second that, and then you would.
I make that motion.
I'll second that.
Okay. Directors Gunther,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Sethy.
Aye. Okay, we'll take up the part
Okay.
2 of this.
So for Part 2, the big question is, are there one or more directors that would be interested in serving for the not yet well-defined countywide redevelopment oversight board in the role of regular member, and if there's a second director that would be interested in serving in the role of alternate member?
I needed some clarification here, if you can answer it. Is there, I was talking to a few other people, is there one position for all the independent special districts on this board?
It's a 7-person board,
Right.
and there's one independent special district representative.
So at the organizing meeting, we have each one of the special districts represented. Then from among that pool, we have to select one
Correct.
that represents the.
Regular member and one alternate member.
Right. So I would like to put my name in the nomination for either a regular member or alternate representing the one position on that board for special districts.
I think that's a wonderful idea. I second.
I should point out that based on the documents that were provided by the LAFCO interim director, it's not 100% clear to me whether somebody could be nominated for both roles. But as the representative on the special district, for the special district, I'm sure that that could be sorted out if there are no other directors from ACWD represented, and we'll just submit.
Right.
Yeah, so, and then I'm,
And I don't want to block anybody that's interested here. But I would relish
encourage you
the
to go for it.
opportunity to
And you'll
be
be
on
able
this
to
board,
vote for
and I believe I
yourself.
can bring a lot of expertise to it as well. I'm going to prepare a promised to prepare a resume and backgrounder that's required as part of the application here with the resolution.
So if there's no other ACWD director, as your general manager said, it's unclear, the process, but the resolution is prepared in a way that we could put Director Sethy's name as both the regular member and the alternate, so that if you go through the process and you're not selected as the regular member, your
Right.
hat is still in the ring for the alternate.
Right. That'd be great.
Providing the process allows that.
Correct.
And we're not 100% sure yet.
We prepared the resolution in that way.
I went through most of the document. I don't think they're clear on.
Correct. It's
Correct.
complicated stuff.
It's moving very quickly, and it's complicated, and it probably doesn't help that there's an interim executive officer. So we did not receive these materials with a lot of advance notice. We had a warning that they'd be coming, and then we received them. So we had to move pretty quickly to get this on the agenda this evening.
Well, if it changes, then we can just adjust, can't we?
Yeah, so I'm not too sure. Can you repeat the question?
Well, my concern is this, if they, let's say we go with Director Sethy, if they come back and say, oh, you can't do that, can we vote again?
I'm not so sure you'd have time, but I think Director Sethy is the president who will be on this
Can
committee.
he, let's say, appoint somebody based on the fact that they changed the rules, or?
No, I don't think you could do that. I think we need to take
Got to
action
be covered by a
tonight
resolution
Right.
approved by the board.
So,
what ACWD wants to do.
and it's really, if there are no other directors interested in being an alternate, it's a moot point.
It is.
True.
So we'll prepare the resolution that provides President Sethy with maximum flexibility to go to the meeting and participate in the process.
I'm trying to remember, what day of the week was July 11th again?
It's a Wednesday.
Right. So that caught my eye today because the next meeting of the Alameda County Special Districts Association is that same morning. And I don't think they were aware of this going on. Kind of represents a conflict.
Well, maybe some of your competition won't be able to
Hopefully
make.
they're over at the other meeting, which is going to be in Hayward at the HARD facility, Hayward Area Recreation
Right.
Board.
My guess
Just
is,
down the street, a few blocks away.
my guess is they might adjust that, but if they don't, maybe that
Yeah.
helps.
And they have their own election of officers going on at that meeting as well. So I hope they're all over there.
I hope you're at the one you're planning on tonight.
Yes, yeah. I'll be at the right one.
Do you have comments, or can I make a
So-
motion?
No, that's fine. Make a motion, we'll roll with
Then
it.
may I make the motion?
Yes, please.
I would like to make a motion to adopt a resolution nominating Director Sethy for the Countywide Redevelopment Oversight Board regular and alternate member, and authorize the attendance and compensation of Director Sethy to attend Independent Special District Selection Committee and Countywide Redevelopment Oversight Board meetings as may be required in their designated roles.
I'll second.
Directors Gunther,
Aye.
Akbari, Huang,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Sethy.
Enthusiastically, aye.
All right, thank you. So the next item is reports.
Yeah, I was going to ask if we could take a 15-minute break.
Sure.
It's about 8:15 right now. How about if we reconvene at 8:30? All right, we'll bring the meeting back to order at 8:30, and I'll turn it over to the general manager.
Regarding board committee reports, item 6.1, staff did not have any presentations to make, but were available to respond to questions. Operational reports, same thing.
I just wanted to note on the production report, we're hovering below or right at 30 MGD since the beginning of the year and popped up to around 40, over 40 for May, and I hear we have some even better numbers.
Yes, the last couple of weeks, our demands have been in the range of 44 million gallons a day.
That's quite nice to hear, and we really haven't had hot weather yet. So I'm kind of surprised that the demand went up by almost 50%.
Warm the other day.
40%, 50%, right? So we may finish May and June with some better than expected revenue numbers.
And just want to point out that, as people are transitioning from emergency conservation to normal water use efficiency, these numbers are still significantly lower than historical numbers before the drought. So it doesn't mean that customers are wasting water.
It's very true. If you look back a couple of decades ago, we were up at almost 80 MGD.
Yeah, I think my recollection of our all-time record was like 82 MGD, max day.
Yeah. Okay, so back to staff presentations, item 6.3.2, website.
So Laura Heides has a brief update to explain what staff has been working on with our website redesign, and then we have some colors for you to look at.
Thank you, Mr. Shaver. Before I get started, I just want to acknowledge Shireen Gonzalez, who is the project manager for this website upgrade and redesign project. She's been doing a great job, couldn't be here today, so I'm going to do my best to share what we've been up to. Let's see. So just to give you an overview of the project, we'll be upgrading ACWD's website to a new platform. You may recall that the district uses Civic Plus as our website provider, and so this is basically just an upgrade from their, I believe it's version 4 to version 5 platform. So it's not a whole brand new company and website tear down rebuild, but an upgrade. It will result in improved usability for the users of the website, as well as on our end in administering the website and updating it ourselves. And it will also have an updated look and feel. So some of the features of the new platform include improved navigation. It'll bring us into all the current Americans with Disabilities Act compliance with all of those rules. It will be mobile responsive, which our current website doesn't do quite as well. It has a more intuitive design based on how people are now using websites. It has more flexibility for changing the navigation on our end as we're finding new things we may want to put on the website or reorganize it. And it also, our contract will allow for another redesign after about 48 months. So not a huge update and upgrade, but a little refresh redesign at that point. So to give you a sense of the project timeline, on March 29th, we kicked off the project with participation through an interdepartmental core team that's been working since then on reviewing content and working with Civic Plus on what we currently have, what we need to bring over, and what some of the needs are for the website moving forward. Here, June 14th, we're here to present sort of a blueprint of the new website and some proposed colors, and just set expectations. You can think of this project as like building a house. So we're just going to be sharing the blueprint today that kind of shows the rooms and how they would be laid out, and then we'll deal with the furnishings later. So after we take a look at that, I'll give you some brief homework assignment to get back to us with any comments. And then we'll be working with Civic Plus to move forward with doing the artwork and the design, and we anticipate having that completed around August 24th. And then we'll be updating content and ultimately rolling out the new website around the December 17th timeframe. So to orient you to some of the elements of the current website and how they will change, I wanted to walk you through briefly our current homepage, and it's a little bit hard to see, so I apologize. Let me see if I can use the mouse here. If you look here in the top left, this is what's called our site ID. That's the first place people's eyes look when they come to your website. Let's see, global navigation is what you see across the top, and any website you go to will have that, and it's the top tier categories of all the things you may look at on the website. And then you have what is called the graphic buttons, and that's these buttons that you have here and also we have a few buttons here, and these are high frequency things that people come to your website to do. So we talked with Civic Plus about how we're using them now and what customers come here for, and we'll be having new graphic buttons on our new website as well. So keep that in mind as we're looking at the new one. We also currently have our news flash here down at the bottom of this part of the page with updated information. And then you'll also notice they're teeny tiny on this version, but we have a variety of links here at the bottom that are kind of things that people might commonly go to or kind of look for on any page that will bring them back to directions, contact information, things like that. So that's our existing website, and some of these similar features will be on our new website. So with that, I don't know if it's drum roll worthy, but we will take a look at the blueprint of our new site. So I'm going to go ahead and do this with the actual website because it's going to be easier to see. So, okay, so I know it's black and white. It's not very exciting. But if you look here at the site ID, that'll be on the left. Currently, you remember it just says Alameda County Water District. It doesn't include our logo. We've asked them to include our logo so that as people come to the site, they'll recognize right away it's us. The global navigation, the different menus that people can choose from will be right at the top there. And then our social media and our search will be here at the top as well. And they've explained that when someone comes to your website, they always look first left to right and then down, so that's why they've selected placement in this manner. This hatched area will be a big photo that will draw people to the site. That's common in a lot of websites these days, and in particular, if you'll see some of the Civic Plus websites, it's a similar type of a feature. The graphic buttons that are the high action links that people use will be here. They'll be like little icons or pictures of sorts. And then you'll scroll down, and there will be 3 different buckets of links, as we're kind of calling them. And this is also something common you'll see. And the buckets that we're thinking of are for residents, for businesses, and then for partners. And you'll see that on one of the other websites that kind of lends itself nicely to grouping different things that people might visit your website for. And then you keep scrolling down, and you'll find that there are news and events. The news splash would be on the left, and then we will have a calendar on the right, and it'll have an actual little grid calendar and then a list of the events going on. And then you continue scrolling down, and it has, again, our logo here on the bottom, and then it'll have contact information, and then quick links, and then helpful links on the bottom as well. And so the quick links, I believe, are things that, bless you, might take you to other pages, something quick that you need to get to, and then helpful links will be things like about us or contact information, all that. So kind of 2 different categories of helpful links. So one thing I do want to mention is that when you look at this on a mobile phone, or if you squish the page, which I won't do, but you will see that it adjusts. So that's how it has the response to mobile that's more modern. So this will be the main page, and then there'll be a variety of different interior pages that will all look similar, so I'll show you briefly what that looks like. It'll have a very similar look at the top with our site ID, the global navigation, and then the search. It'll have a picture background in this area, could be the same as the front or not. And then it will have some feature links, sort of related pages that people can link to on the left, the primary content of that page, and then a feature column on the right that currently is very inflexible with our current version, but will have a lot more flexibility to provide pictures here or put frequently asked questions or other spotlight feature items on the website. And then again, on the interior pages, you'll have your graphic buttons of high frequency actions that people will want to do, and then similar information at the bottom that's common to the different pages to make it easy for people to navigate. So that's sort of the quick overview of what that looks like. Let me show you real briefly here. This is Marin Municipal's website. That's also a Civic Plus website. It has sort of a similar, here's their site ID, their different top-level navigation here with their menus, their searches here. They have a lot of writing and stuff here in this sort of middle thing, and they've got some different pictures and things. But here you can see their high-frequency buttons. They've also got a calendar. They include their Twitter timeline here, too. And then their newsflash is kind of small here on the left. And then they've got the 4 residents, 4 businesses, 4 partners buckets there as well. And then the contact and link information at the bottom. So you also get a sense of it's kind of a clean look with a white background and then a different color scheme. You'll see also here with Contra Costa's. This is also a similar Civic Plus website, and they just recently went through a redesign. Similar, they've got a white background and then, the similar features of the website. You see their nice photos here and their high-frequency buttons. And then they've also got their news flash, and they have a calendar. Ours will have a little grid calendar as well. And then they've got also different, sort of 3 different buckets on their site, and also their contact information. So just to show you what the calendar will look like, this is for a city in Texas, but this is sort of the general thinking about a calendar so people can see what days things are happening in a calendar view and make it right there on the home page. They've got their news flash next to it as well. So it's very difficult, and I apologize. I will be sending you all a follow-up email with links to this so you can look at it yourself and poke around and browse and check out the colors. This is the color scheme that the Civic Plus has recommended. White would be our neutral, so we'd probably have a background white page similar to Contra Costa or Marin. And then you can't tell exactly, but these are about 4 different shades of blue and then another shade of yellow that would be sort of our accent color. And they recommend you stick to like 4 main colors and an accent color and then a neutral. And then the color scheme does have to meet ADA requirements too for contrast and such. So this is what it looks like on the screen. It looks better in real life on your computer, but I'll let you check that out at home at your leisure. So I'm happy to talk about any questions you may have, but I did want to just, as I mentioned, I'll be sending a follow-up email to you with some links and that you can look at, and if you can send us any feedback you might have by the 20th of next week, that'll help us get back to a Civic Plus in our project timeline and move ahead with the process. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
We'll start with any director.
I'll jump in with one quick comment. In your contingency planning, if we had a link to the public through the website, I think that'll be very helpful.
A link to?
To the public, we can tell them if we have a crisis or a problem, if we're repairing in a community, when we might get to them, where the priorities they are, and save a lot of telephone calls.
Yes, that is definitely something we will have, and my understanding is I believe we do have some pages that are like that right now that are set up that are just sleeping. They're hidden right now.
Public information that Union Sanitary might be able to provide us to tell people what to happen when there's no water.
Okay. Thanks.
No comment.
What are the ADA compliance requirements for a website?
So I can't speak to that in great detail, but what I can tell you is that there are a variety of newer requirements about how your website is set up to make it accessible to everyone. And some of those things include on pictures, you have to have alternate text so that it can be read and that sort of thing. And there's other features that the website has to have. There has to be certain contrast colors for the way it visually looks to make it as accessible as possible, and things like that are all required. And Civic Plus has been doing this, and that's one of the main reasons why a lot of agencies are updating their websites right now. So we're confident they will help us do that.
I understand there's a provision that with special software that it can read the website as well. So if you're impaired site-wise.
And what languages will be supported by the website?
So right now, it's only in English. We've looked at a few different websites. There's not a lot that are translated. That's something I believe would cost extra if we asked for that. But at this point, we're just planning to go with English.
Can we get an idea how much it would cost to get some different languages?
We certainly could.
Cost for a live feed?
For a live...
Live feed from a camera? Is it additional, serious additional?
A live feed from...
Say like to broadcast board meetings
Oh.
No,
live?
You know, some places like they have the
Like check out the watershed,
Oh,
what's
like a-
going on now?
a webcam or a Alameda
Mm-hmm.
Creek cam or something. That is not something I think we've thought about, so I couldn't answer that.
the fish cam.
A fish cam, good question. If there's significant interest in that, we could look into it.
It might be as easy as just having a link to a particular location, but I think we can look into it for the thousands of fish that will soon be migrating up
It'd be kind
Alameda
of maybe
Creek.
not the most exciting thing to look at, but
It will be if it happens.
Purple camera.
So I will,
blue herring feeding.
so we will work with our IT department, I think, to look into something like that.
Is that it?
That's it.
Okay. So, Laura, if you go to quite a few of our Southern California, Central Valley water districts, you will see a Spanish translation link. It's right at the top. So you say, you're already in English, and then you can say Spanish, go to that. So I would encourage us to take a look at that simply because we have a broad community of people that speak Spanish. And if I were thinking of another language for the area, because, it's like our water quality report, it's in so many multiple languages that it's available, right? But we have a large Asian population. Most of the Indian population speaks English, nearly everybody. So we have kind of a subcomponent that's Mandarin in the community. And I would think Spanish and Mandarin are probably the two top things, but I would certainly try to push for Spanish because we have two cities, Newark and Union City, that are heavily, Spanish speaking. So I would just take a look at that.
Okay, we'll check it out.
All right, number 2. This is a suggestion on where we have the link to our agenda and board materials. Currently, we have our board agenda, we have the minutes, the full package to our board meeting, plus the minutes from the prior meeting, and the committee reports for the prior month. But we don't have a link, because periodically I check to see if we've got something up, where it says under committee meetings, it has the calendar for the meeting dates and who the chair and vice chair is. But you cannot pull up a committee meeting agenda. And sometimes, even as a board member, I want to go and check what the engineering committee is doing this week, or what's on the committee meeting for water resources. And I usually don't find out until I get my board package and read through it for what happened during the prior month. I think it would help the community to know. What do you think?
Okay, I thought they were on there, but I don't know that I've tried.
Our committee meeting agendas, I thought they were posted as well.
Can you click on it?
And that's the request to make sure that we post the agendas. And
Right.
Are you thinking
There's no,
they should link from the calendar or?
no, where it says committee meetings,
Mhm,
and you have the calendar,
mhm.
there's nothing to click on there that gets
For
you
an agenda.
for an agenda to the committee meeting.
Okay.
We'll make
We'll
sure
check that
that's
out
easy.
and we will endeavor to see if we can make that more readily accessible.
Right, and the committee reports are always available in the board binder. So I think that would help the community at large, you know, if they're interested in attending. Most people don't even know what's on our agendas, right? Okay, and then the third thing is, one thing I really like on some websites I've been to, and I think Orange County Water District might be one, or Irvine Ranch, I have to go back and check. There's a few that, hey, I'm a former Orange County Water District member there, Barry, that put all kinds of really interesting things on the website for students, teachers, just people in general in the community, like how much rainfall do we have so far during the year? What's normal? You know, where are we? They put a little thermometer on, you know, or something like that. What's the weather? What's the groundwater situation like? Because that helps to educate people that we get a good portion of our water from the groundwater system. And we've got fantastic data. It's just a matter of posting it, right? And I like Jim's idea about if there's any way of showcasing our watershed, that would be kind of a cool thing to do. We had talked about at a prior meeting using a drone to make a video of the entire Alameda Creek watershed. And even if we can't do live camera action, we could certainly post videos that are educational, right?
And staff is looking at that. Some, like, footage of the watershed.
Yeah, I think that would be really good. Last thing is, you know, when we had Frank John here, we had all these really great educational things that were going on with the schools, including the calendar painting contest, right? Well, and we would have this boardroom absolutely jam-packed, you know, going out to the street with parents and teachers and kids. And it was just a fantastic thing because we'd have like 4,000 students involved every year, and then we'd narrow it down in the competition. What I'm seeing coming up now, and CSDA has been showcasing and starting off some competitions for different special districts, is video contests from the students that are on a subject matter. They're having all kinds of digital graphic contests instead of having to do the old-fashioned, you know, drawings that we have some of them out in the lobby here. They're playing to the what the kids are having most fun with today and where they feel they can be most creative. And all we have to do is come up with the subject idea and rotate it once a year or periodically. Give kids a chance, like CSDA is doing, to put together like a 3-minute, you know, video on water-saving ideas in your backyard. How to use a rain barrel. You know, there's all kinds of cool things that people could be looking at. What kind of fish are going to come up Alameda Creek? You know, I would like to do a little video on that.
So in the context of this agenda item, we'll look at the website with that in mind. But I'm also hearing a request for a future agenda item in which we will bring back ideas in terms of engagement with the community and how we go forward with that. And we're having discussions right now. We've got a task force underway jointly with Union Sanitary District to see if we can pool our resources and resurrect the calendar contest or maybe do something else that is positive. So I think we'll come back with those kind of ideas. But in the meantime, for the development of the website, we'll look at capabilities of posting video or live cam or those kind of things.
Right. Well, when we had the USD Centennial, at the open house that they had. And it was just amazing to watch the kids running around all over the place, and they were really interested. Who would think, you're talking about sanitation and sewage. They wanted to look under the microscopes, look through the pipes on the computers, I mean, we've got a whole tech-savvy, younger population out there, and they're looking to do fun, exploratory things like this. I think we need to give them that venue.
So I do have one follow-up comment.
Yeah, those are all,
So-
anything.
So first of all, the committee meeting agenda and minute is posted, it's just buried. The link sent you to the board meeting agenda
Right.
and minute, you just have to keep on going down, so
Right.
that could be fixed.
Right.
As far as translation, I was searching, I thought I remember Google actually has a plugin, so when you do your website design, when you work with Civics Plus, make sure that whatever you come up with is compatible, because that is the cheapest way
That's
to
the
reach
easiest
as
way.
many languages as you can. So can you just double check with Civic Plus that is capable? That's it.
Great.
And the nice thing about using Google Translate or some other similar service instead of sort of doing it ourselves is that I think people are more willing to accept a little weirdness in the translation. They understand that, and it's dynamic.
Yeah.
So everything you post, then there's that capability.
Right.
But I've traveled and I've used the Translate to English, and you just got to know that the
Right.
translation is not perfect.
Right.
If I can just add on to that, I think one of the websites that you did pull up had the plugin already in it.
Great.
So it seems like it's possible.
So that's, if we can do that, that would be great, because the actually translating everything that we do into multiple languages, we'll be talking to you about the budget, if that's something that you really want.
So here's my final question, Laura. Good segue here. How much is this costing us?
Actually, that's a very good question, and it's, I can tell you the exact number here. It's costing us, for the upgrade to the new platform and the redesign, is costing us about $7,400, which, if you look at going to a whole new provider and starting over,
very
it's a humongous project. So and Shereen and I have both been really impressed so far at the level of service we're getting, given this price. So,
But then we do receive continuous support from
yes,
Civic Plus.
we have ongoing contract with Civic Plus as well for the hosting. There's an annual fee for that too, that is on the order of about, I could tell you, it ranges from about $5,000 to nearly $6,000 over the course of the longer-term contract
Well,
per year.
knowing what that base cost is, it makes it even more compelling to try and take a look at the Spanish translation or a translator link or something like that.
Great.
But Civic Plus is pretty economical. And you'll see if you look at their websites that they do come out nice, as long as you spend the time setting them up.
Okay, are we done with your presentation?
Yes,
You got
thank
all the
you.
input you want?
That's
And
great,
more.
thanks.
All right. Okay, we'll move on to 6.3.3.
Electronic billing presentment and payment update, and this will be presented by, at least initially, by John Wunderlich.
Sure. So we have Barry Carlson here with us this evening, our customer services manager, who will be making this presentation and who has been leading the internal project on the electronic billing presentment and payment system. And also in the audience with us this evening is Katrina Bates, our customer service supervisor, who has been working very closely with Barry on this project, and I know has been fully engaged in testing recently, and so along with a number of our customer service representatives. And so I'll go ahead and turn it over to Barry to walk us through the presentation.
Thank you, John. Mr. President, members of the board, thank you for having me here tonight representing the finance department. And to kind of trail on to John's comments there, Miss Katrina Bates there, she's really the hardworking person behind this, doing all the testing and everything. They just got me up here because I'm the pretty face, so that's why they got me up here. So let's get going here. What I wanted to do is really highlight three things with our conversion that we're doing right now, and that is we're going to talk about the previous/current billing and payment structure, the new billing and payment options that we'll be providing very soon, and then also our customer outreach and engagement. So with the previous billing and payment, currently what's been happening over the last few years, we have multiple vendors. And that's something that's happened from the growth of the district. So over the years, especially the last 10, 20 years, we've had technology improvements and things like that. And because of that, banks have decided, hey, you can pay from my bank, or credit unions say you can pay from my credit union. You can pay through websites and different things. So what happened was with ACWD, we said, yeah, we want to do these things. But because of that, we ended up inheriting a bunch of different payment paths, basically, that causes us every day to reconcile each payment path individually. So that is a very tedious process. It takes a lot of time, but it's happening, and it's worked. But the part, kind of the negative about that is that it has limited the ability for customers to have that true experience. So, for example, if a customer wanted to pay through their bank, they would have to log into their bank. But if they want to get an e-bill through somebody else, they would actually have to go log in separately to get their e-bill. So their customers would be going through multiple different avenues to be able to do business with us. So with the getting a little bit more deeper into that, we also have two different e-bill options right now. We actually produce an e-bill ourselves, an electronic bill, and customers can also get a different e-bill through a different vendor. So that's a little bit of a unique situation right now. And of those different vendors, we have 5 different vendors. That's kind of what I highlighted earlier. So we have this reconciliation process that happens every day. And it's also vendor-centric. So to the customer, as I highlighted, that's something where the customer is not necessarily the primary object of these business processes. It was the vendors that were the business object. So that kind of limited the functionality that the customers would be able to participate in. So about, I think it was August, September last year, the board went ahead and approved the contract with InfoSend. And so now we have one billing and payment vendor for us. And what that has done is it's really, really streamlined pretty much everything within customer service. It's very exciting for us. It's a lot of work, but we see the light at the end of the tunnel. And what that has done is it's put us in line with one vendor for both billing and payments. So the e-bills and the payments, it's only one vendor. So what that will do, that will provide very simple reconciliation. Basically, every day we'll receive a report from InfoSend that'll say, hey, we received this much payments. We compare that to our bank, make sure that the two match, and then compare that to the billing system, and hopefully every day those numbers all match. So that will save us some good time. But I think the big thing, especially for the board, is that our customers will realize that it's customer-centric. And what does that mean? What that means is that our customers, when they go onto our website, when Laura's done updating that website and everything's beautiful, they're going to realize that they're now in a position where they can just log in one time, they do one event with us, and then they can pick and choose from what services they want to or they don't want to participate in. So they're not bouncing around to those different vendors. That's very, very exciting. So that also gives us the ability in the future to start expanding the services that we provide. The comments that President Sethy mentioned about school things, whatever, as we move forward, if we have additional logins, it's all single sign-on, and that kind of leads into my next slide. AMI, as we move forward, all these different things, as we start to throw our customers these new pieces of information that they may want, they only need to log in one time, and that's very important looking towards the future. Also, another big advantage that customers will have is that it'll be real-time account balance information will be in front of them. So literally you could make a payment, check in again 10, 15 minutes later, and you'll see your payment applied and your balance goes down. That's very big. We do not have that right now. Also, this is the one where I think when you go out and you talk to our customers, you see them at the grocery stores or whatever, get ready for a couple hugs, because there's going to be no fees for credit cards and also just the ACH and debit cards. So that's huge. We in customer service are already receiving phone calls about this, and they're kind of like, well, wait a minute, the fee's still there. And we're like, okay, hang on, we're almost go live, we're not there yet. But I think that is one where you as a board will really hear a lot of the feedback. There's going to be some bugs, there's going to be some things happening. You'll hear a little bit on that. But I think by and far, the customers out there will really give you some positive feedback in regards to the fees. And then also e-billing. We do have e-billing right now, but it'll be streamlined. The big thing with the e-bills is it will be how we message out to our customers. So we will have, obviously, you'll get your initial message when we produce the invoice. You'll get an email, and it'll say, this is your bill here. Click on this link, and you'll be able to view your bill. Let's just say we have a 21-day grace period. Day 18, you don't have your bill paid yet, you'll get a reminder email. Hey, just give you a heads up, couple days, your bill's due. If you don't pay by the due date, on the due date, you'll get a final email that says, hey, you might want to pay, your bill's due. The board made the very kind of bold decision to go and move ahead with late fees. And so this will really help our customers with late fees. Any concerns that customers may have, hey, I didn't get that first notification, well, guess what? Now we're giving them two more than what we give today. So again, we're really positioning ourselves to provide excellent customer service. So I'll go ahead and I'll touch on Laura's world here a little bit. Customer outreach and engagement. It's very interesting. This is a very, very difficult part of the project, because we want to tell our customers what's going on, but we have to be very careful how we do it. So we have three things we want to talk about tonight. Goals. So what was the goals, or what are the goals of our outreach and engagement? What are our methods and timing that we've been using and that we're going to use? And then how are we going to support the customers? So the goals of our outreach were, number one, create awareness. We have to tell the customers, hey, this is coming at you, right? So we wanted to create awareness. Number two is ensure that they're informed. So the difference between the awareness and informed is, hey, we want you to know that something's coming at you, but then we want to inform you. We want to give you a little bit more information. Lastly, we really want to promote our own brand image. This is very important. It's not so much what we think of ourselves, it's what our customers, how they view us. So by moving forward with EBPP, Electronic Bill and Payment Presentment, it really helps us position ourselves to give our customers that image that, yes, we're current with the times, and we really want you to make it easy for you to view and pay your bills. So the methods that we use are three-pronged. So we basically did our bill messaging and inserts, Aqueduct newsletter, and then also some print media. And lastly, the website and social media avenues, we use those. So now the timing. So I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. We wanted to use a very strategic approach with that, supported by our strategic plan. Our approach is clear and open. And also that we wanted to provide information, but not too much information. And then also we wanted to notify our customers early, but not too early. So it's a very fine balance when we go out and we start doing outreach with customers, and we're talking about something that's very personal to them, and that is money, and that they have to pay their water bill if they want to continue to receive service. So they get excited when we tell them about new things, but we don't want them to get too excited, because until early July, we have our existing system, and that's not going to go away until early July. So we have to be careful on how much information we tell them. So how have we done that? So if you look there, that first box on the top is March and April, and that we pretty much just provided bill information, or excuse me, bill insert information, and then also we did some customer call teasing, meaning that whenever a customer called us back in March and April, we had our customer service rep said, hey, by the way, we got something exciting coming up in July. Just kind of keep an eye on our website or in the next bill message, something like that. Just kind of tease them a little bit. And then in May, we expanded a little bit. We used the aqueduct. We did some messaging there. We incorporated some messaging within the bill message itself, and then also with the insert. And then we started advertising to our walk-in customers through the, put up a little poster in our lobby. This current month in June, we started reaching out through social media. We did, or we're going to do an email blast soon. And then another special bill message, insert, an envelope snipe. What that is basically on the actual envelope on our bill. You know, they have like the little star or something, you know, important information enclosed. Those are actually really effective because most people just rip open the bill and they look for the bottom line and that's it. So we really want to let our customers know there's a special message inside. And then lastly, press releases and Tri-City Voice announcements. And then moving forward to next month, pretty much some of the same stuff, just more intensive. We'll utilize our website, email, we'll do some more email blast, social media, Tri-City Voice, press releases, bill insert, bill envelope and messaging, and then a customer call information. So that'll be very important for us in customer service with the customer service reps after go live, which is July 9th, Monday, July 9th, very important day. After that happens, our customer service reps on every phone call that we get, they'll be informing our customers, hey, we have a new bill presentment and payment options available. Do you want to participate? And most of the customers will say, yes, I definitely do. And we'll help them out. For those customers that want a little assistance, we'll help them out. So that is all I have as an update for EBPP. Would love to answer any questions that the board may entertain.
Director Weed?
Metrics on the number of people using the e-bill versus the write the paper check and get the bill in the mail.
Yeah, so currently we have about 15,000 that do e-bill out of our 84,000 customers. And that's where it gets really tricky because when we were going through the RFP process, that's a key number as far as pricing is concerned. And we're anticipating that number to double quite easily, which puts us at the advantage. So what happens with the e-bills is hopefully every e-bill that you generate, that you have a customer enroll in e-bill, they're enrolling in paper lists. So then what happens is we're not paying postage. So that's really where the savings comes from. It helps offset the additional cost of the e-bill.
And the opportunity for financial incentives to get people onto the e-bill process?
It's not structured that way right now. For us internally, the big financial incentive for our customers, there's no fees. So there are actually, a number of customers that are willing to pay the $3.50 today, but the plastic, people that pay via credit card, that will be the one that will go up the most because there is no fee anymore. So it is a financial incentive for the customer.
And it's been suggested that many customers would prefer to have a monthly bill. Would we have that option under the e-bill at no additional cost?
The additional cost would be the additional e-bills themselves and payments processed.
And those are nominal or
we're looking at, it's probably, it would double, and just the e-bill side, not including postage and paper bills, we would go probably about $12,000 to $24,000 a month for overall cost. A month.
If I might add on to that a little bit, if we were to ever make a transition to monthly billing, there's a lot more work that would need to go into evaluating the impacts that would have. Yes, there would be the hard costs of additional bills to print and mail, but we would also have to evaluate things like if you're touching your customers twice as much, so everybody gets a bill every month, is there going to be more call volume? Are there going to need to be more customer service reps and other things too? So I just want to make it clear that the additional cost of that change wouldn't just be maybe an extra $12,000 for sending some e-bills.
Maybe the confusion is I was suggesting that we use the e-bill platform only as a mechanism to do the monthly billing. Person cuts their bill in half. Get twice as many. But if that can give us more flexibility in the way we structure our bills, then also the ability to charge interest as opposed to a late fee, we might be more easily tracked in the accounting system.
I do have one clarification, though. If we go to monthly bill, that is assuming AMI is in place. If not, there will be the actual labor
No.
to go out and read the meters,
I'm
right?
arguing that we can separate. You don't have to have a bills, don't have to match a read. That's the break we have to make.
Director Weed is talking about estimated bills.
I see, okay.
We're actually taking a bill and splitting it into two parts. True it up every quarter, 4 months.
Director Huang?
No,
Other
no more
comments?
comments. I
Director
actually
Akbari?
think this is good.
I think it's a good idea. I'm glad we're moving in this direction. The only comment that I have is on the ACWD connection. There's a little screenshot here, and it says we're going green. It sounds like we weren't green before. I would have preferred if we had said like we're going paperless, something like that, just so it doesn't give the connotation that we're not green in our current form. So
Greener.
greener, yeah, that'd be nice. But other than that, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah,
Glad we're
thank you for that.
doing this.
If you're already on e-bill, is that going to get canceled out?
Yes.
I would like to recommend that we waive the late fees for the people who are on e-bills, that the e-bills by late fee that will be coming. Thank you.
Yeah, we've discussed that
I'll probably
internally.
remember mine, but if I wasn't sitting up here, I would almost guarantee you I probably would forget mine. And I think for a couple months, we're going to see that. And it would be, I think, because we went to e-bill for convenience.
Yeah.
And maybe some of us aren't as tech savvy as others. So I'd really be looking for to have a late fee waived for anybody who was on e-bill because their e-bill got canceled. And their intention, may not be on their water bill, but on maybe something else.
Done. So, and that's what we're actually anticipating the majority of the work after go live will be, is phone calls. Because you touch on a really nobody knows how to get around that really efficiently. And I'm talking about the actual payment for providers out there. Because what happens is, with e-bill, it's very convenient. You literally don't get a paper bill in the mail anymore. And as long as that number is somewhere close to your comfort zone, whether it's $65 every other month or $120 every other month, you don't even question it. So when that doesn't get paid, because the e-bill didn't come, and the customer doesn't look in the mailbox, or they just throw it away with the rest of the junk mail, then they'll get the reminder bill. So what we anticipate, a good 25 days or so after go live, we will start to receive those type of calls. And the late fees will be waived. We're looking forward to taking that, using that as an opportunity to kind of holding the customer's hand and walking them through the process. It's very simple. It'll be very, very easy for the customer to re-enroll in e-bill, but it's something that does have to be done, and it is going to be painful for the first couple months. But I think the reward far outweighs the inconvenience over the next couple months. A year from now.
I personally think they're going to want to. It's just it's the, wait a minute, I was on it.
Yeah, and we
You guys canceled it.
Yeah.
We looked at mapping people over automatically, but it became so complicated and so rife with potential disaster, that starting over with a clean slate was the best way to go. But you're nailing it in terms of, on one hand, it's unfortunate that we're going to ask people to change. They're going to have to change. But we're trying to do that in a way that actually promotes goodwill as opposed to going backwards.
I can live with it. I'll be there.
Me too.
And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of us basically are customers right here.
Yeah.
So we'll be, looking at how this goes in our own experiences.
Right.
And it might be useful to track us to see, well, no, I mean.
You don't think you're tracked
actually,
already?
Realistically.
We already do. We have
you
dots on
you
GPS.
I'm
that show
offering
you.
my services in that, I don't know, that this bill is not one of my top priorities. I have, I pay it. I have to.
Right.
I'm a director, for gosh sakes. I better pay it. But, I'm on e-bill. It's convenient. I've been on e-bill since like the day one. That's a long time ago. And, that letter may come this date, and I may be heads up to here and something at work, and that check or that bill thing comes through the house, and the wife sees it, off it goes into the garbage, or excuse me, the recycling. And I didn't catch it, so if I don't, watch my account, because I'm going. I just don't know which way yet. I can talk to the wife, hopefully, if I remember. But, I think it's a great thing. It's just that, we start canceling people, and I'm offering, like I said, I'm offering my account up. If I get to that level, please call me, beat me, whatever. I'll make it happen.
Okay, we have people.
We have people, oh, great. Yeah. You see my thumbs.
Well, Barry, I mentioned to you in our finance meeting that I was going to be your guinea pig. So I'll give you a little report or feedback.
Good.
Probably by the end of the month. Something I'd like to focus on, because it's hard to see this, but since I've spent my career in product management and have had to launch a lot of products, it's hard for people to see that to launch a product or a service requires so much work in the details, the minutia. And if you had to put together a Gantt chart to see what you've done over the last 3 years, even 4 years, to move this to this point where we can launch, there are so many dependencies here that we had to go through, many of them sequential, right? We had to get all of our IT services properly in order. We had to bring on new banking services, new payment processor service systems. Your planning for going out to the community, has to be really well thought out. So there's a lot of work here, a lot of work in the devils are in the detail, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to acknowledge that.
Thank you, that means a lot. Because there are, as Laura is being exposed to customer service, every day, literally, there's changes.
Right.
Something is moving. And so that affects our marketing. But yeah, thank you. And I appreciate that. And I know, I'm glad Katrina's here because the district has been putting a lot of pressure on her as well because of that. And that it's
Right.
in a good way, because we're bringing forward a very good product. I believe to be an excellent product. But yeah, you're right. There's a lot of moving pieces.
And it's for that very reason, I was very appreciative that you mentioned the district brand, because you see a lot of companies that go through a failed launch on something, and it destroys their brand, right? Or they have to go through a recovery period on it. So it's really trying to make absolutely sure from every single angle that when you go live and you launch, it better work, right?
That's right.
So there's
No
always...
pressure.
That's why I'm smiling. This might be my last one. No.
No, I'm glad that it was in your thought process, the thought process of the team,
Yeah.
that, hey, we have a brand here, we're the elected members of the community, and I would say that it's imperative for us,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
You don't want to go to the supermarket and have people, complaining about things to you.
No.
And Katrina, I want to thank you for staying until almost 9:30 tonight to hear some feedback, which leads to my only real question here. Do we have enough customer service staff to handle what is going to happen in the interim period, or do we need to bring on some temps? How are we managing
So
all
the answer
those
is no.
issues?
And we currently have one temp right now that we're bringing up to speed, and then we have another one starting on Monday. So we'll have two additional folks for the phone. And that will be to cover the additional influx of calls, which there will be, but it's also helping out the ACWD staff as well, because we need to keep in mind they're also learning a new product. And they'll be trained prior, but when you're talking to somebody on the phone who may not be having the best day, and you're actually entering information in a new platform, that can be difficult to do in a somewhat timely process.
Mm-hmm.
And so that will really help out the customer service reps and having the temporary employees there as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we do have two more additional folks coming on, and that'll only be, we plan on only about 2 months, probably the first billing cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Second billing cycle will calm down quite a bit.
I have a second request regarding credit card payments. If you were to go to a credit card payment,
Mhm.
is there a signal or something when your card expires? Or because that nothing drives me more crazy than when my credit card expires and the number's still the same, and it stops making those payments, which I don't look at, and all of a sudden, the next thing I'm going through my Fast Track, which I forgot the password for, and you can't get to talk to a person because I don't know what my account number is, and the thing goes boop, and it's like low funds. Ooh. What year is it? And I realized that, I haven't updated that credit card in a while. Or God forbid, Wells Fargo calls you up and says, we just canceled your credit cards because we think your account's been hacked.
Right. So the answer is yes.
And do we have a method of waiving late fees in the event of that, particularly the ones where your account's been hacked, your Wells Fargo credit card is no longer in existence?
Yeah, so you'll recall when we were preparing to establish late fees, the board asked, or kind of pointed and said, do this, that we have a hardship waiver policy. And
I don't
so,
really consider that a hardship. I mean, that's just my own stupidity.
but that could lead into a financial difficulty type of situation. So the answer is yes, we do have a hardship policy, and as long as the conversation with the customer checks off a box or two, then we can do that, knowing that we're doing it in a prudent way.
I'm just throwing it out there because I don't consider it really a hardship, but I do understand the person that's going to get this, because by no fault of yours, your credit card ends up getting canceled, and all of those things that you've got on there, that just automatic bill pay suddenly.
Yeah, so with what we're using, I believe it's about an 8-week notice. So we do track the expiration dates of the credit cards.
Okay.
So basically, Director Gunther would receive an email about 2 months prior to it expiring, just saying, hey, heads up, the visa that you have on file is going to expire in September.
Because I don't believe a lot of people do that.
Yeah, well.
Thank you.
The water utility that you're a board member of will be doing that, so.
Thank you for the reminder.
Okay.
Good?
All right, thank you, Barry.
Thank you. Enjoyed
Thank you,
it.
Katrina. Good luck.
It's the calm before the storm.
So we'll move on to 6.4 and general managers reports.
Yeah, we'll dance through these pretty quickly. I know the board's pretty familiar with making conservation a way of life in California. We put this on the agenda because at the time it really wasn't clear what the requirements are going to be, and we talked about this earlier in the meeting. But I just wanted to ask Ms. Myers to talk about the district's plan moving forward in terms of the issue that was raised by the board about, okay, so what does this mean for our water supply planning, and what does it mean for our financial planning? So, Ms. Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Shaver. So even with the significant population gains in our area, overall water use has dropped significantly, and the district has already met the target of reducing water use 20% by 2020, well before the 2020 date was required through previous legislation. And the impact to the district in the short term will be staff time to continue participation in stakeholder discussions, gather data, conduct assessments, and report. And the level of effort will depend on the outcomes of stakeholder work groups, workshops, studies, pilot processes, and a number of other things that will lead to the recommendations that will take place over the next few years. With that said, we will know more about the district's objective, and we'll find that out near the end of 2021 when all the recommendations are released. District staff will continue to evaluate the new legislation, integrate the requirements into our long-term planning activities, and the board will be updated through committee and/or board meetings as appropriate. In addition, a water efficiency master plan project will be kicked off soon, which is part of the board's 5-year strategic plan to identify remaining district-wide water use efficiency potential, develop strategy options, and drive the district's water efficiency programs for the next 20 to 25 years. The plan will also be used to support the work to meet the new legislative requirements. So that concludes my report, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
None?
Okay.
I think
It sounds like you're doing an excellent job.
expounded long enough on this issue.
Okay. If I may, the next item, 6.4.2, is update on banking transition to JP Morgan. And Mr. Wunderlich will briefly bring us up to speed on that important project.
Sure. So at the same board meeting last fall, when the board approved the contract with Invoice Cloud for the electronic bill presentment and payment, the board also approved a contract with JP Morgan Chase for general banking and lockbox services. And so we started in January of this year with the serious work of that transition, and effective June 1st, so about 2 weeks ago, we transitioned all of our general banking services to JP Morgan. A lot of staff time and effort has gone into that. It's been primarily led by the accounting division with a lot of support from customer service and IT staff through that process. We are now issuing payroll and general accounts payable checks through our JP Morgan bank accounts. And this is the first banking transition the district has undergone since we went to Bank of the West 16 years ago. With our new banking relationship with JP Morgan, we do have stronger reporting for our cash management, stronger security features, such as positive pay and ACH blocking and filtering capabilities that will better safeguard district assets. We are currently working on the lockbox transition and anticipate that will happen by September of this year. Just as a general reminder, the general banking services include essentially maintaining the district's various bank accounts, wiring funds for purchases, deposits, cash processing, electronic fund transfers, storing digitized copies of paid checks and statements, cash reporting, security features, while the lockbox services is processing the checks that customers send to the address noted on their bill. So with that report, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
None? Sounds like another member of staff is doing an excellent job.
And our payroll checks did not bounce,
That's right.
most importantly. Of course, I would still come to work if I wasn't being paid, but staff might not. Okay, so the next item is 6.4.3. Just wanted to give the board a quick heads up on a kind of a new potential initiative, and that is that I met with the general manager of Union Sanitary District and the assistant general manager of the water enterprise at San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. You know them as Paul Eldridge and Steve Ritchie. Recently, both of those individuals have been asking me about ACWD and our plans for recycled water. And so the purpose of the meeting was for me to introduce them to each other, as well as to talk about our agency's potential mutual interests that seem to overlap, especially in the world of recycled water and indirect potable reuse. And both individuals are intrigued. So we talked about potentially hiring a consultant as 3 agencies to further evaluate the project. And you may recall that this is a project that was identified in the Bay Area Regional Reliability Study and could be eligible for grant funding. The recently passed Proposition 68, as well as the future Jerry Merrill bond, which has, I believe, $250 million earmarked specifically for BAR projects. So the scope of work would be to take a look at ACWD providing desal water to San Francisco by physically interconnecting our systems and pumping into the Hetch Hetchy regional system. This would allow us to operate our desal plant at higher rates, potentially, as long as we had a supply to recharge the groundwater basin behind it. And that's where the recycled water being treated to essentially potable water quality going into quarry lakes would come in. So the things it would look at is water quality issues related to ACWD, desal water going into the San Francisco system, pressure, siting for a potential pump station, distribution system modeling on our part. In terms of the recycled water element and the indirect potable reuse, we'd look at that process. USD is looking at master planning for potential changes to its plant. What would the footprint look like of the additional process, siting plans, the water quality of the water that would go into quarry lakes and making sure that that's okay and acceptable, as well as a pipeline alignment study to get that recycled water to quarry lakes. So the other principals agreed in concept to splitting such a study 3 ways. ACWD agreed to draft a scope of work, share it with the other agencies, and we'll see if this goes anywhere. But just in case you hear about this, I just wanted to make sure that you're aware that I'm having these discussions, and also give you the opportunity. I know the board is split on recycled water issues. If you feel that the general manager is going astray, this is an opportunity to pull me back and say not really interested in this at this point. But so it is on the agenda. If you feel that I should unplug, I'd appreciate knowing that.
What's the estimated cost that we're looking at?
Don't know at this point. Before going into entering into any agreement, obviously I would bring this back to our board. So right now it's an exploratory exercise to look at what it would take to do this kind of analysis and planning, and then potentially take it to a formal scope of work and a potential RFP. But before entering into any agreement, come back to the board for future discussion.
My understanding is that San Francisco would be the primary beneficiary of this, so why wouldn't they pay for a disproportionate share of the cost?
Well, Union Sanitary District is interested in this because they have EBDA pipeline issues at some point. San Francisco is interested in this because they have contractual water supply requirements that they have to meet. And for ACWD, frankly, this has potential business ramifications as well as water supply reliability ramifications with an enhanced water supply portfolio. So the three people involved in the discussion felt it's hard to tell who's going to benefit more or less, really, at this point. So just equally splitting it made the most sense to us to try to figure out what, as opposed to trying to figure out the absolute share that each party should take on.
Are we, what was the cost of the last recycled study we did with USC? Wasn't that around 250,000?
Do you remember, Michelle? It sounds about right, but I'd want to get back to you on that.
I remember 250,000.
Yeah, my guess, if I had to guess, this study might be in the same ballpark, but it's really picking up from that last study and kind of acknowledging that purple pipe is probably not sort of the future for us, and building on that study to look at this specific application and having multiple funding partners and a potential regional project and really good chances of something like this landing some grant funding. And we're talking a modest-sized facility, modest-sized thing, maybe 4 MGD, something that's modular and could be expanded.
If I can make a request, before staff comes back to the board with more of the exploration of, where we're going, it might be helpful to have a copy of that last study recirculated to the board, just so everybody gets a refresher, and we've got one new board member.
Certainly.
Helps get everybody on the same starting page.
Sure, no worries.
Well, I had hoped this had died when we had our last report, which suggested that the recovery rate during the winter months would be less than 20%, which gave us a range as high as $7,500 an acre foot in the down with an average of $5,500 an acre foot for recycled water.
Well, this is a little different, Director Weed, in that what we would be doing is by pumping water from the groundwater basin, we're making room more. So it allows us to leverage the basin more.
It's still at least $1,300 to $1,500 an acre foot for the water we're putting in, and if the recovery is only 20%, those basic hydrological numbers haven't changed. So we can put as much lipstick on the pig as we wish. I don't see how we, if we were going to be honest about it, how we get around the hydrology. So, thank you.
Well, I would respectfully disagree with Director Weed. I think the study would probably help us decide what's the constraint. But I actually do have a request. I was wondering, would all parties be willing to consider direct potable reuse? Because the legislation is changing. Potentially it would be a cheaper project because we don't have to build that pipeline to Quarry Lake, and the constraint of operating the groundwater basin will go away. So it's just tossing out the idea out there, since we're kind of on the cusp of changing legislation. I believe the state board is working on the requirement for direct potable reuse. So that's another opportunity, and you offer different type of flexibility and potential cost saving.
I think we can definitely add that to the scope. It brings in some additional issues besides public outreach and regulatory. Distribution system limitations also come into play in a bigger way. So we can definitely add that to the potential scope and see how it shakes out.
And if I could quickly ask, you would do this even though there's absolutely no indication we have a shortage of water supply?
What staff's position currently is that we have 5 years to think about what future water supplies we need, but then there's the likelihood that we're going to need to do something. for out years. And the assumption is it would take 10 years potentially to do something. And that's what we presented at the strategic planning workshops. So, you know, we're within that first 5-year window where we really don't have to move forward on anything at this point because future water demand is still pretty unclear.
Supplies are extraordinary and getting better. Okay.
And there's still uncertainties with supplies, given the said unimpaired flows issues with San Francisco. We have a little more certainty now on the California water fix, but schedule-wise, there's still a lot of uncertainty. So there are issues.
Now, if San Francisco were willing to sign up for $5,500 an acre-foot water, I think that'd be, and sell it to people downstream, that'd be interesting.
Well, you might, if we go forward with a project like this, they might be willing to buy it from us.
Okay.
I'm done.
Well, I'm in favor of us at least moving forward with the study. I was curious, who initiated this to begin with? Was it San Francisco or?
The concept that we're talking about originated from ACWD and was inserted into the BAR process as a potential regional water supply solution, utilizing the San Francisco system as sort of the conduit of that because it's already regional. So both general managers were aware of the concept, and they've been thinking about it. They have their own needs, and they initiated this meeting with me separately. And I said, well, if you guys are both into this, then the three of us should get together, and I need to introduce you two to each other as well. And that was what happened.
I will strongly support this because of a third party being involved. It changes dynamics completely of, and I mean PUC, in that the dynamics here have been changed. And I think it's important that we look at this and take a nice, long study on it. So I support it.
I'm going to withhold any further thoughts I have right now.
Okay.
Keep an open mind.
Okay.
But could I ask for one other report, if you might?
Sure.
Want to give it here? We had some email exchange about Metropolitan taking a revote coming up on the California water fix. And suddenly San Diego County, what is it? San Diego
County Water Authority. Mm-hmm.
Changing their mind and flipping all of a sudden?
So, yes, President Sethy asked me, so what led to San Diego County Water Authority changing their mind? So I contacted Maureen Stapleton, who is the general manager at San Diego County Water Authority, and essentially asked the same question. And what she explained is, yes, San Diego County Water Authority has had long conflict with Metropolitan Water District, especially about costs and cost of water. And so they were opposed to the California water fix. And now that the water fix is moving forward, and there was a positive Metropolitan Water District Board vote on that, the San Diego County Water Authority Board organically decided to change their position because now that the project's moving forward, they want to have as much say and not be marginalized in the decisions that need to be made along the way. And one of the critical decisions for them is how are the costs of the water fix project going to be allocated among the Met members. So that was a big part. And then Met is re-voting on the issue. And I think both of those, and the reason why they're re-voting is because there was a claim that there was some sort of Brown Act violation. So they just want to clean that up. So between the two issues and San Diego flipping, it should be a much more positive outcome in terms of overall Met support for California water fix. And I think that's probably a good thing for ACWD.
So the original vote was by weight, 61% in favor on the Met board. And Met by itself is dozens of board members, right?
Almost 60.
Huh?
Almost 60.
Yeah, almost 60 board members on Met. Can you imagine that? Like to be in that boardroom someday. Okay, well, then San Diego County Water Authority by itself has 34 or 36 board members. 36. So imagine 36 board members now feeding into close to 5 dozen on the other board. What caught me by surprise was when we were at Aqua, all we were hearing was how San Diego was sticking by all the environmentalists, and I mean, every environmental group had persuaded the board members down in San Diego to show their support. And then all of a sudden, after Met approved, and it appeared that there was going to be a revote based on some Brown Act violation, now all of a sudden, San Diego is, which for years has been opposed to the California water fix, all of a sudden says, forget all those people we were supporting in the past, we want a seat at the table. That's what I read. And so now it's going to be up near probably 80% support.
Yeah, it's conservative politics-wise down there, so I could see San Diego, this is just me guessing, but cozying up to the environmental community because they had a mutual interest. But San Diego's interest was not to just stop the project, it's financial.
It
Yeah,
appeared to
and-
me to be very close to what happened down at Santa Clara Valley Water District.
Bingo.
You know,
So,
they stuck with the environmentalists up until the last day and had a narrow vote. Go the other way.
a couple of other really quick issues on GM reports. July 4th parade is on July 4th. Laura, do you have anything that you'd like to ask the board about that?
Which is a Wednesday?
I believe it is a Wednesday. It starts at 10 a.m. And for those that would be coming, we'd be asking you to come a little bit early to stage and be ready. And I was just wondering if anybody had plans to for sure attend or for sure not attend.
On July 4th, I'll be there.
It's on the same place as last year.
Yeah, same route.
The same route.
Okay, so at least there are a few, so it's worth putting together our
Great.
parade.
We'll be sending out an email too with information for everybody, so you can decide to come at the last minute or whatever.
Probably working, but it's all right.
And then, just because it's just kind of a cool story, one of our employees, Evan Buckland,
Crazy.
is participating in a race in which the participants are rowing from Monterey Bay to Waikiki Beach in Hawaii. The race started with 5 boats. There's different classes. Some boats have 2 rowers, some 3, some 4. His particular boat is a 4-person boat, and 2 boats have already not made it. They've ended their quest because of rough seas and other issues. So there are 3 remaining. If you're interested in viewing the exploits of our ACWD employee, who on one hand, I admire him for doing something like this. On the other hand, I think he's out of his mind. I encourage you to go to the Great Pacific Race website.
.com.
And they show actual live GPS footage of where the participants are. You can read up about the crews, and they're doing quite well right now. They're in first place, but just some information. We're featuring it on our social media and having that go that way. So it's just a fascinating, crazy endeavor.
I had a chance to speak to Evan about this at length on the Del Val tour, and I think the longest I've ever been at sea, I can't quite remember, but it was crossing the Atlantic at 7 miles an hour because one of the cutters, maybe we were going 8, had a propeller failure. He's nuts. We were on a relatively large ship. He's on a 4-man rowboat. They are rowing 24 hours. I admire him for this. I wish him incredible amounts of luck. I really, I mean, having been out there for a much shorter period of time, where the only thing you see, in our case, was at least we saw the other boats. He may not even see that. Be gentle when he gets back. I really wish him luck. I am absolutely thrilled he's doing it, actually. I think this is great for the district. I think it's something that I could never do, for gosh sakes. Like I said, we talked at length, and tell you what, when you're up in the Bering Sea or if you're out in the middle of the Atlantic, it's lonely out there. So, yeah, he's taking on something that's really, really tough.
I checked today, our first place team was 232 nautical miles out, and it's 2,400 nautical miles to Waikiki Beach.
I think you
So-
said 40 days.
Yeah, so after 8 days, they're just approaching around 10% of the distance. One of the 2-man crew, which is very experienced, capsized actually in 16-foot waves and gale storms. And were paddling on the side of their boat in the ocean. So they had to be rescued. And the 4-woman team, not sure what happened there, but this is like training for the Olympics.
One of the women could not continue, so the other 3 thought it would be unsafe as a 3-person team. Okay, so just moving us along, director's comments. I just wanted to point out that I think we did have a typo on the agenda, and that it was Director Sethy who attended the May 3rd South Bay Engineers Club meeting, and I believe it was Director Weed who attended the June meeting. So for your reports that your board rules require you to do, that would meet those requirements.
So, Director Weed, I'll let you get started.
One of the non-technical meetings on with someone how to engage the public on issues and get the message out. And it's worth noting, and some experience primarily in their Caltrans experience, but it has a cover in any type of capital project. Thank you.
Okay. Director Huang, and Director Akbari, Director Gunther. Okay. So, apparently I forgot to give one report last month, so I'm going to catch up on what I was remiss on. I did attend the South Bay Engineers Club meeting on May 3rd, and the reason I attended was because the subject was on Measure B, the 30-year half-cent sales tax down in Santa Clara County, and how VTA is dealing with all the different projects and how they're prioritizing them. And the reason I went is, even though it's Santa Clara County, all of the project elements factor into similar measures that we have in Alameda County and southern Alameda County, especially when it comes to interagency dependencies. So, for example, they were showing all of the displacement and relocation of underground utilities that have to occur when all of these other improvements are being made by Measure B. And it's quite extensive. It's like the project we worked on with San Francisco and Union Sanitary up by Mission Boulevard and 680. But they really have to schedule out the projects in the proper way and everything, and since we have a lot of spine work going on in our main replacement program, I thought it would be informative, and it turned out to be extremely informative. The one thing that I anticipate we're going to have to deal with, which they're dealing with, is just the disruption to traffic services and detours and rerouting traffic and bicycle lanes, you know, handicap facilities, things like that. So I know our engineering team does a good job, but I became more informative about the process there. Okay, quickly, although it's not required, I did attend on June 7th the Dawnbreakers Lions Club presentation that Laura Heides gave. I had to be there sharp at 6:30 in the morning. Real Dawnbreakers. Laura gave a great presentation. She captured everybody's attention, and we got a nice nice breakfast out of it at the same time. So, and by the way, that was the Lions Club that our former director, Phil Udick, belonged to for a long time. So we heard a lot of good compliments and stories about him. Yeah. All right, that's it for me. Oh, and I'm going on my Aqua One regional tour tomorrow of the Russian River watershed. And at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, we'll be river rafting from north of Healdsburg, going south, and spend the entire afternoon going through presentations on the Aqua One watershed.
Oh.
So it should be interesting. I need to leave at 5 a.m. in the morning.
I think we're also scheduled for one other aqua trip, which is the Headwaters trip at the end of June, and I would like to sign up for the McCollum on the 22nd of June, which is Region 3.
Yeah. I looked at the McCollum River one. I'm not sure if I can go on that one. But, yeah, Director Weed and I are going on the Water Education Foundation Headwaters tour at the end of the month. They have a very interesting agenda, and they added a
Folsom
Dam to the schedule just this week. So it should be interesting.
So we have a couple of closed session items.
Yeah. So why don't I turn it over to our general counsel to read us into closed door?
That would be great. It is now 10:03 p.m., and the board is going to go into closed session for two separate closed sessions. The first one pursuant to California Government Code Section 54957.6 to confer with labor negotiators. The agency designated negotiators for this closed session are Robert Shaver, Jennifer Rogers, and Glenn Berkheimer. And the employee organizations include the Operators Engineers Local 3 and ACWD Operators Association. The second closed session will also be for to confer with labor negotiators pursuant to California Government Code Section 54957.6. The agency designated negotiators for this closed session will be Robert Shaver and Jennifer Rogers, and they will be, the labor negotiations will be with regard to unrepresented employees, the management, confidential, and professional employees. You may now confer into closed session.
Okay, so we are adjourning, I would say, to closed session.
Adjourning at 10:05, and we'll report back. Yes. We're back in session at 11:14 p.m., and I'll turn it over to our general counsel to describe what happened in closed door session.
Perfect. The board convened in closed session, two separate closed sessions. The first closed session, item 8.1, pursuant to California Government Code Section 54957.6, conference with labor negotiators. Agency designated negotiators, Robert Shaver, Jennifer Rogers, and Glenn Berkheimer. Employee organizations, Operators, Engineers Local 3, and ACWD Operators Association. And in that closed session, direction was given to the labor negotiators. With regard to the second closed session, item 8.2, pursuant to California Government Code Section 54957.6, conference with labor negotiators, agency designated negotiators Robert Shaver and Jennifer Rogers, unrepresented employees, management confidential professional employees, and in that closed session, no action was taken. And that concludes the open session reports.
Do we have any other matter to take care of?
Yes, we do. We have item 9, which is possible board action to amend the Management Confidential Professional, or MCP, Employees Compensation Schedule, and Human Resources Manager Jennifer now Solito will be making the report.
Thank you. In closed session, item 8.2, the board considered options to limit the growth in total employee compensation costs through amendments to salaries and a broad range of benefits for unrepresented employees. Unrepresented employees include management, confidential, and professional employees, also known as MCP employees. The terms and conditions of employment for MCP employees are provided in the MCP Employees Compensation Schedule Handbook. To accomplish the objective of limiting growth in total employee compensation costs, the following changes to the MCP Employees Compensation Schedule Handbook are recommended. To Section 1.1, salary increases, add a line to this section to provide a 1% cost of living adjustment effective with the pay period that includes July 1st, 2018. The cost of the 1% salary increase is approximately $182,000 in fiscal year 18-19. To Section 14.1, medical plans, add a line to subsection A and subsection B of this section to specify that flex dollar and dual coverage benefit allowances will remain the same for plan year 2019. Further clarify that for employees participating in the district's premium contribution benefit, the full premium cost up to the second most expensive HMO will be covered by the district. The proposed health benefit for the active MCP employees saves approximately $396,000 in fiscal year 18-19 compared to providing the benefit at the highest cost plan. The maximum monthly flex dollar allowance for health coverage in 2019 for each eligibility level shall be as follows. For employee only, $1,062.26. For employee plus one dependent, $2,124.52. And for the employee plus family, $2,761.88. Employees selecting a health plan that is more expensive than these maximum amounts will have their full premium covered up to the amount of the second highest cost HMO. Employees selecting a health plan with a premium more expensive than the second highest cost HMO will be required to pay the difference between the selected health plan premium and the district's contribution amount. The maximum district contribution for employees receiving the dual coverage benefit, or cash in lieu, at each level, eligibility level shall be as follows. Employee one, employee only, $366.70. Employee plus one dependent, $733.39. And for employee plus family, $953.41. To Section 14.8, retiree health insurance, the board has directed staff to pursue development and implementation of a defined contribution program for retiree health insurance for all new hires hired on or after January 1, 2019. The parameters of the program are to include the district contributions to eligible employee retiree health savings accounts, also known as RHSAs, or a similar type vehicle. District contributions are to be set at a percentage of $120,000 a year, with the following percentages. For employees who have passed probation up to 5 service years, receive 1%. For 5 to 10 service years, 2.5%. And for more than 10 service years, 2%. The provisions of this program are to be developed and brought back to the board for final adoption and further amendment to the MCP Employees Compensation Schedule Handbook to include final program language. This is expected to save $15,410 in fiscal year 18-19. The net fiscal impact of all proposed changes is estimated savings of $120,920 in fiscal year 18-19. The MCP Employees Compensation Handbook was last amended in September of 2017 when the health benefits for plan year 2018 were set at the same dollar level as 2017. So the recommendation before you, by motion, approve amendments to the MCP Employees Compensation Schedule Handbook for 1, provide a 1% cost of living adjustment to MCP employees effective July 1, 2018. And number 2, for plan year 2019, maintain the flex dollar allowance for premium contribution and the dual coverage benefit at the same levels as plan year 2018. And 3, establish that the district will fully cover the premium for the employee's selected health plan up to the amount of the second highest cost HMO plan. Also, we recommend that the board direct staff to pursue development and implementation of a defined contribution retiree health benefit program for employees hired on or after January 1st, 2019. These corresponding recommended revisions to Section 1.1, Section 14.1 are attached in the handout that was provided. Revisions to Section 14.8 regarding the retiree health insurance will be brought back to the board at a later date.
So as board president, I would like to move the staff recommendation. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And we need to take a vote. Who can substitute as our secretary?
I can do it, I think. Director Weed?
Aye.
Director Huang?
Aye.
Director Akbari?
Aye.
Director Gunther?
Aye.
President Sethy?
Aye. I think as board president, I actually can
Was
do
there a
it too.
motion and a second on that?
Yes.
Yes.
Motion, second.
All right.
And we have who made the motion and who seconded it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, like, USD has their meetings and the board chair just says, you know, what's the vote?
Okay.
3 ayes, 1 abstention, 1 nay.
So
We had
we're
five-
just
we had
new
5
without a
ayes.
district secretary
Yeah, so
here.
for the record, it was President Sethy who made the motion and Vice President Gunther who seconded it.
Yes. So I have signed all my documents here for Andy. So without anything else from the board or staff, we will adjourn the meeting at 11:22 p.m.